I didn't ask either. Did you watch that documentary?
I did. Absolutely, I did.
Excellent. I watched it again today.
It's so good.
It's really good.
It's a really, really great documentary.
I started watching it and I was like, this seems kind of goofy, like the whole storyline thing they got.
Oh, sure.
But then as it went on, and then like John Carpenter shows up, and I was like, this is great.
John Carpenter's
it's
so cool.
So well. He's the coolest. He's the coolest. Oh man, he's so cool.
I don't know if it's possible to be any cooler than John
It
Carpenter.
absolutely isn't, and it's like on just full display here.
That's so fucking. It's so interesting that like he has a monolithic presence in this genre.
This genre, it basically would not exist without him.
And like the idea that he's Marty McFly, basically. like your kids are gonna love it. Like, that's basically what
like
fucking
actually, yes.
Because, all right, so check this out, right? Episode 34, recorded July 30th, 2022.
A little bit of squelch.
Yeah. So nice. Yeah. Are you playing all that, or are you doing like an arpeggiator?
So all of this, I think the bass line I came up with on the step sequencer of the synth itself. Mm-hmm. But then once I got everything hooked up to the DAW, I just made those patterns in FL Studio itself, in like the piano rolls sort of thing, the step sequencer in there.
I gotcha. So you picked the fucking notes.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You can do arpeggiation for sure.
Because that was the thing.
But that's like cheating.
Yeah. But like when I was like fucking around with like because I got an analog synth laying around, and I was like, wait a minute, I can just push these like yeah, and I can
go up to this other key and this other key, yeah. It's basically a song at that point.
I was like, you motherfuckers.
You're trying to tell me y'all been doing this this whole time.
This whole time, yeah.
You gotta be kidding me. But no, everything on here is except for the drums, which are just like drum sounds out of FL Studio that I still had to put the notes for. So like that's not a stock drum beat. Like I made that in the thing. But everything else is that synth that I bought. So the low shit, the high shit.
Oh, that's cool, man.
It's pretty fucking cool. It's pretty versatile for what it is.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I've just been falling down that rabbit hole for the past few weeks, like trying to get this to work, and then like, all right, now I got this going on, and I'm starting to understand this. I got some synth plugins for FL Studio.
Nice. And
figuring out how all that shit works. It's the same, just different, you know. And now I'm like, all right, what's my next step here?
Yeah.
And I'm looking at like a Moog, and it's like $500. I'm like, this looks like it sounds really cool.
Dude, those mini Moogs look amazing. I spent like a month last year just Googling synths and stuff.
So they just put out one that's called the Mavis, and it's it comes disassembled. So it's like you kind of not fully disassembled, but it's like something that you can rack mount, but it comes with an enclosure. So you can put that together, or you can put it in your rack. It's like $350, I think. So but it's modular. Seems pretty fucking cool.
Yeah.
So I'm trying not to fall down that hole, but it seems like if there's a hole you're gonna fall down, something like this is not a bad way to go.
The people I don't know anyone who has regretted falling down the synth.
That's kind of what I'm telling myself is that it's going to be hard to regret this.
The other thing too is that though from what I can tell is that those things hold their value pretty well.
Yeah. Because the first thing I did was like, let's go look at used ones. Yeah. And they're not like that much cheaper.
They're not.
Especially because the older they get, well, I guess it depends. Like guitars probably, but you know the ones that are original, billions.
Oh, for sure.
Whatever.
For sure.
So. But even the shit that they put out these days, because they're all hand built, which I didn't realize. Pretty cool. But yeah, those hold their value pretty well.
Well, even a lot of the other, not just the Moogs, but like a lot of the other ones. Like, because I ended up with like a Behringer Deep Mind.
Oh wow, yeah.
Was what I ended up with. Because I was like fucking around and that was like one of the Like, oh, this one would be really cool, you know?
Yeah.
This one, and then there was like a Korg MK something or other that I was looking at real closely. And,
Right.
And I was in contact with my buddy, Zaya. You remember Isaiah?
Yeah.
And because he went deep, way off in that world. He's been around in there for 10 years.
He's one of those dudes that you see the YouTube videos of walking into their music room and it's just walls of synth.
Kinda.
Hell yeah.
He went off. He went deep.
Because that's the show where I see that and I'm like, I could never have this, but man, what if I had just like a little bit of it?
You're like, if I had a house, this is what would happen.
Sure. Eventually, I would build up to just lining the walls with synths.
Yeah. You're like, this wouldn't even be a room. This would be the living room.
Yeah. Exactly.
But I was like, hey, so what do you think? And what he said, like the first thing that he sent me, I wish I had my old phone and I would just find the link and send it to you. But he like sent me a link to something on Reverb, and it was like a big modular, you know, like with all the things. And he was like, not only would this look amazing in your studio, but
it was just a recommendation for you.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
And like
I bet it would look amazing.
Yeah. Like it was like I think like $700 or $800 or something like that. And I was like, that's not really
dollars.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah. Well, he knew what he was looking for.
Okay.
You know what I mean? He might be a good guy to ask him about stuff. Because I don't know, he asked some really good questions and was like, what do you want to do with this? Right. Like, what aspect are you interested in? You know?
Yeah.
And at the time, I was like, I mostly just want like cool sounds, cool, inspiring sounds. Is like I wasn't super interested. I mean, yeah, I'd be able to tweak things and make them sound unique or whatever. Yeah. But I wasn't as interested in like the synthesis aspect of it, of the sound creation aspect of it, you know. But yeah, but yeah, you know, if you're gonna fall into something, because you could always get a piece of gear, try it out for a few months, and then sell it for $50 less than you paid for it, or $100 less than you paid for it on Reverb.
Yeah, exactly.
No fuss, no muss.
Exactly.
You know?
Which is why I went with the one that I did, because it was like $150. So like, this is basically like. This is me learning if I even want one of these things.
Exactly,
right?
Yeah.
And so I've been playing with it for like a month or so now. I'm like, I'm gonna want another one of these things. I think.
Nice.
That does slightly different, maybe slightly more. You know.
Nice. So. Where they seem to hold their values better than like guitars, or like mid-level guitars. It seems like, you know, like you buy like a.
I mean, there's a lot less that can go wrong over time.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. That's not true. I don't know enough about secondhand guitars.
Or I guess what I'm saying is like the synth is gonna sit there, and you're gonna use it, right? You're probably not gonna beat on it and shit like you are a guitar. Like a guitar's gonna go through a lot more.
I guess that's true.
It's probably gonna go a lot more places too. Well, that's
depends.
Presumptuous, yeah. Yeah.
That depends. Yeah, I don't really know, because there's been some guitars I've been eyeing, and then I look at them used and they're like the exact same price. So it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But
it just depends on what you're going for.
Yeah, but whatever. I don't know. Like, musical gear is not the worst thing to spend money on, because that stuff does hold its value pretty well.
Of all the things that you could say something is an investment, I think that's one that's up there as like, this is like a real. I consider that to be an investment,
especially because it's usually coupled with some aspect of learning.
Exactly. Exactly.
Or
why.
Some aspect of creation.
Yeah, I don't even mean an investment financially, because like you said, you can sort of resell it and get most of what you paid back, probably most of the time. But what are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
If you're going to actually buy something and use it, then that's what I consider to be. And if you're just going to buy something nice and put it up on the wall, then that's not the same thing.
Or get a really nice couch or something, or a really nice, you know. Although now that I'm like older, I'm like, hey, you do need a good chair.
Right.
It doesn't need to be a nice per se, but it does need to chair well.
Yes. The question of like, what are you going to get out of this? What is this going to do for me? How is this going to improve my life?
Yeah.
It becomes way more pertinent than like, can I get the cheaper one?
Yeah, I guess like it might be you could argue that sort of like scale and ratio wise it's a better investment than like a car. Now because it's hard to say because like you need your car. But you're not gonna like, I don't really prefer this car. Let me just sell it. Let me just sell this car and get another one, and I'll get
motherfuckers be doing that though.
80% of what I got back, and I guess so, man. It's nothing that ever occurred to me.
That's beyond me, like as
me too.
Concepts,
Yeah, me too. I shouldn't talk because some people are into that, and that's the thing, and that's some people are into like working on cars and all shit. I'm not trying to shit on that.
Sure. That part of it I'm more into than like, there's a new model out and I can trade in my last year's model and get the new up.
Yeah,
let's do that. Like that's
I don't get that.
Beyond me. I understand. But
I mean, everyone needs to be into something, I guess, but
yeah,
I don't get that.
No.
No. I like to spend my money on instruments that I'm not going to play and books I'm not going to read.
I can get behind that, unfortunately.
I like to. My bookshelf is a painting in progress.
It's slowly organize it to where it like makes some sort of a picture.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, there you go.
Yep.
There you go. And look at all these wonderful writers I supported along the way.
Right. I was saying that there were like years that went by and I hadn't read. Because, like, same thing, I buy books from time to time. And it's been so long since I actually read a physical book. Because I was doing audiobooks for a very long time. Yeah. But then over the past, like, month or two, I've been reading actual books. Like, I just finished one and started another one.
Do you feel a difference?
How?
Like in audiobook versus reading a physical book?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Especially because when I was doing audiobooks, it was, like, when I was commuting. And I haven't been doing that for a long time.
Sure.
So I haven't had much opportunity to do that anymore. But also, it's like you do interact with it in a different way. Yeah,
and for me, my retention is pretty. I don't want to say dog shit, but dog shit adjacent with just an audiobook.
Yeah. So, because there's some like. The person's voice comes into your mind and you have to deal with that and how they phrase things and you have to parse what they're saying. And
I guess because I am so visual and so not just visual, but I'm very spatial. And so if I am reading, there are books that I've read and if I think of the quote, I know about where in the book that line was important to me, and I know on what position of the page. Wow. Like I know if it was on this side or this side, if it was in the top, in the middle, or the bottom, and if it was about 2/3 or halfway through or whatever. I have a spatial, Wow. So like my like retention and my ability to find and recall the information is much, much higher with a physical book.
Interesting.
Yeah, that might not be everyone. that might be a more specific to me kind of thing. But I often will have like a pencil when I'm reading, and I will often like make little not like I used to just like full on like underline shit, but now I'll just like, oh, that was really important, or not like important for my understanding, right? Like not like, oh, that's who is.
So not like important to the story necessarily.
Right, or an important point, because I read a lot of nonfiction and stuff, but something that's like this particular paragraph or this particular whatever, like it really resonates with me. It really hammers a certain point home. It's said really well, whatever. Yeah. Stuff that just, a little parenthesis there, or a little dash in the margin or something like that,
I've never once done that.
Yeah. Did you do any of that like in college? Were you a highlighter in college?
I don't think so. No.
Man, I fucked some books up.
I think a lot of books I got already had that shit going on anyway because I used, you know.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Part of me is like it helps keep me engaged when I'm reading a physical book too, because I'm so fidgety and so tactile.
Sure.
You know, so
that makes sense.
You know, like if I can have like a fucking pencil in my hand while I'm reading, you know, it makes it easier, even if I'm not doing anything with it.
Man, that's fascinating.
Yeah, there's a whole thing there of asking people what their individual experience of reading is like.
Yeah,
you know, like my buddy Jacob, who's gonna come up a lot in this episode. He would ask this question to people, you know, of like what's that experience like? Like do you hear when you read a book, do you hear a voice? You know?
Yeah.
And things like that. Or
absolutely yes.
I absolutely do not.
Wow. Yeah, that's cool.
It's just it's just ideas. You know what I mean? It's just like it like kind of just it bypasses this audio thing.
Cause like cause I've seen those same sorts of conversations or whatever, like claims that people make about how they experience reading, and I can't even conceive of what it is like to not have that, obviously,
right, yeah,
because that's how I do it.
Do you always like, so when you hear a voice, right, is it always the same voice?
Oh no.
Do you cast someone? Because that's what Jacob would do. Jacob would like
consciously say, I think this is going to be Samuel L. Jackson or whatever.
Yeah, like John Wayne's gonna read this book, you know, or like
absolutely not.
Or like, you know,
for me, it's just whatever the voice comes to my head.
Whatever happens.
Whatever happens. Yeah. But there is always one, and it is distinctive.
That is fascinating.
Yes.
Because that's absolutely crazy. Not. I interact with books similar to, I guess, maybe how you interact with math problems. It's like this is information in a line, you know, like this isn't. This does not need to be spoken to me for it to have meaning.
Yeah. I guess, so everyone interacts with an audiobook the same way.
Right.
In that case.
Right. I will say, though, sometimes if there is something that is particularly dense or that I'm having trouble understanding, like maybe it's something that's a little esoteric philosophically or something like that, I will imagine I'm reading it out loud.
Do you ever just read it out loud?
Yeah, like kind of like under my breath, you know? Like, but not like, you know?
Oh, you're not like practicing oration, you know, on your own.
Right, but I'm like, okay, so, you know, like, yeah, for sure. But it is interesting how forcing myself to conceptualize it as being spoken does engage different aspects of my brain that allows, and I think it makes me slow down.
Are you a really fast reader, would you say?
I don't feel like I am, but I do kind of like will read sentences in like blocks. Like
it's like trying to explain this weird thing that you've never had to really explain much before.
Yeah, like I don't see each line or each word individually in sequence. Like I'll see like the group of lines in the whole sentence and glean that meaning, and then sort of like it's like chunk 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 chunk. And so I wouldn't say I'm a fast reader. I say I'm impatient.
Okay, you're fast by necessity.
Yeah, I'm more impatient.
Necessity of your the rest of your mind.
Yeah. Almost
interesting.
Something along those lines. It's a strange thing because I haven't really thought about it like this, but it's like I don't know that I love the experience of reading, but I love the way understanding things from books makes me feel.
Man.
So it's like I have to be at odds with my own mind to get to that feeling.
Right. You've got to eat your vegetables first.
Yeah. So it's like, oh, this makes so much sense. Like, I love that. Right? Oh, I didn't know that this and this and this and this and this.
Right.
I love that. But that, like...
Do you mostly read nonfiction?
It's about probably 70-30.
Nonfiction, not fiction.
Yeah. 80-20, you know?
'Cause I think I don't read much nonfiction. And I'm wondering... Because it seems like your method would be more useful with nonfiction.
Yeah, I do tend to... I am able to enjoy audiobooks more for fiction and lectures like the
oh sure,
the greatest courses or the great courses series.
I've done a lot of those too.
Oh my god, those
are great.
Audiobooks are, and I retain that stuff extremely well because
that's just a lecture.
It's and I'm used to lectures. I like those. Yeah, I know how those work. You know,
I've been to one of those. Yeah.
So I enjoy those quite a lot in that format. You know.
Yeah.
But nonfiction, you know. Oh well, I don't know. It just depends. Well, the other thing too that like has helped me a lot, is I started just doing both, like, you know, because I've had an Audible membership for however many fuck all years, and so I have bukus of credits stored up, and so, you know, when there's a book that I'm reading, if it's available on Audible, I'll do both.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So you know, so sometimes I'll listen to a few like nonfiction chapters or whatever on Audible, and then I'm going to skim through the book. You know, or vice versa, or you know, or I'm going to read in the physical book and then go back. You know what I mean? I'll switch. I'll go back and forth.
I think that would fucking break my brain.
The only time that it really, really pissed me off was last year I read the God damn it.
The Bible.
It's the Bible. What is it? The Dark Forest trilogy.
Okay, never heard of it.
It's written by a Chinese sci-fi trilogy, you know, written by a guy named, I think, Xin Lu. Would be how you say his name. Now, it might not be called the Dark Forest trilogy.
Is it Xin or Qin or Cin?
CXIUN.
It's not the same person who wrote the Three Body Problem, is it?
That's it. That's what it is.
I just started reading that book.
Oh, dude, it's incredible.
That's the one I just started reading.
Oh, dude, it's so good.
Okay.
All right, so you're on the first one.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, it's so great.
Yeah, I just got to like part 2 of the book.
Oh, it's so good.
So
the first book is so incredible. Cool. That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Now the second one,
I think it's like Shichin.
There you
pronounce it.
You would know better than me. The second one is called Dark Forest. That's what it is. It's called the Remembrance of Earth trilogy. I think that's what it's called.
Okay.
And
I don't know any of that because I just took the dust jacket off and threw it to the side because I hate those things. Just give me like the thing.
So the second one, for whatever fuck all reason, they're like, yeah, let's give this book like 3 chapters. It's like a 600-page book or something.
Oh my god.
You know what I mean? And so like it seriously, like an Audible chapter was like this chapter's 18 hours.
Right.
Or you know what I mean? So like,
fuck's sake.
Figuring out I figured out I had an equation of like how many minutes translated to how many pages so that I could switch effectively. You know, because that's the thing I would need to do because of like, okay, well, I need to do dishes now. I need to do all this housework. I need to deal with the kid. I need to, you know what I mean? If I can just could flip on some headphones and go to the audiobook, then I'm able to finish books at a reasonable rate.
Yeah.
So, but that's why I started doing that. But yeah, it's
I think going back and forth like that would confuse me more than not. I don't know if I'd be able to do it.
There's no practical reason that one should. I did it. I started doing it to solve a very specific problem.
Yeah.
You know, and if no one else has that same problem, there's no reason they should voluntarily embark on something so inefficient. But yeah, Jacob would do something interesting where he would cast people.
That's wild. That's really funny though.
Yeah, like characters and whatnot. Like he would be like, I think Tim Roth should be this guy, you know. And it wasn't like a super like it was something that would happen kind of intuitively, you know.
Right, because like you get a sense of a character and they fit someone you know maybe from a movie or something. And it would
just sort of happen.
Right.
And then like
I can see how you get there, yeah.
And then like, you know, like 50 pages in, he's like, oh man, Gandalf's Tim Roth, you know, or whatever.
Gandalf's Christopher Walken.
Yeah. And Bilbo, Sylvester Stallone to me for some reason.
Ew, Gandalf. Shit, that's not a great Stallone. Man, have you watched Severance by chance?
No, what's that?
It's a show. It's on Apple TV Plus, or whatever the fuck it's called. Mm-hmm. Which I only got because of this show, because I saw it so highly recommended. It's like a sci-fi 9-episode like limited series or whatever you would call it these days. It is. What's the dude's name? Adam Scott is the dude's name who stars in it.
Okay.
He's like the dude from. Oh God, what is he in? He's the asshole lawyer from Step Brothers, maybe. If that helps.
Okay.
I can't think of what else he's been in. I know there's a better example than that. But anyway, I
wonder if he's also the asshole lawyer in Parks and Rec.
Maybe. I never watched Parks and Rec. I don't watch many shows, but
Parks and Rec might be the greatest sitcom ever made, or my favorite. Once you get past season 1. Season 1, they weren't sure if they were trying to be The Office or not. So all the characters weren't lined out.
Right.
But a lot of people talk about how the show sucks, and it's like, well, did you like? Yeah, watch the first 4 episodes. They fucking suck. Like, of course it fucking sucks. Oh, that guy.
That dude. Yeah.
Dude, he's like one of the main characters in fucking Parks and Rec.
Is he really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Ben.
Okay.
How silly that I don't know his name.
Wait, did I give you the right name? Is he really?
He's not. I don't think he's not. He is an asshole in Step Brothers. You know, I haven't had a carb since 2002. You know.
Yeah, that's him, right? Am I wrong? Yeah, that's him. Anyway, this show is like there's a company that you can go to and they will split your consciousness in two, basically.
Okay.
Between the work day and the non-work day.
Oh.
And so the idea is you go there and you go into the building and they've implanted a chip in your head, and when you go on the elevator to the office, you switch to the other person, the other half of your consciousness.
Oh boy.
And you do your work, and that person, for all intents and purposes, is a new person. So when they're down there, they're like, I'm like 2 years old, and all this shit, like a 40-year-old man. And so you don't know who you are on the outside, and you don't know who your coworkers are, and the reasons that people go down there vary wildly, and so that's kind of the setup.
That's big PKD energy right there,
man. Yeah, it really is. Yeah. It's really fucking good. I binged it like the past week or so.
Very cool.
It's real good.
I will check that out.
Yeah, him, John Turturro.
Okay.
Is like one of the other Office dudes.
Mm-hmm.
He's such a good actor. He's so funny, like not unintentionally.
Yeah.
Oh, he's great.
That's splitting your consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, it's not a spoiler or anything because you learn it right away. But like the reason that Adam Scott goes down there is because his wife died, and he couldn't. He like tried to go back to teaching. He couldn't handle it, so he just wanted to get away from it. And so his reason was like, I need to get rid of this, and not
like to get rid of it so that he can be productive and like do his job.
Right.
Because he's still that when he leaves.
Yeah. The guy on the outside has to deal with that shit.
I see.
The guy on the inside can go work and make money and do, whatever he's got to do.
Obligation to take care of this meat body that we share.
Right. Exactly. So, and then other people have their reasons. So, it's you start thinking about a lot of shit.
Yeah.
I don't want to go into anything else, but yeah, it's really good. It's worth watching.
There's some powerful themes in there.
Yeah.
Especially relevant today with like the anti-work movement and stuff like that. I don't dream of labor,
right,
and all that kind of stuff,
yeah.
which that's a thing that I first of all I agree with.
Same,
because I am anti-capitalist. But I it makes me really. I feel I wish that I wish those ideas would have been floating around a little more easily when I was young.
Oh yeah.
You know, because I grew up with this like ridiculous work ethic of like you work hard no matter what. And and like, yeah, sure, like do shit well. Yeah, sure, fine.
That's not an inherently bad thought or standard to hold yourself to. It just depends on why you're doing it, I think.
Yeah, but it's also sort of like, well, just because you're not working hard on a particular, like, just because you're not working hard at a pizza shop or at an insurance thing doesn't mean that you can't work hard on something else.
Yeah.
And it's not a slight against your character or anything like that. And that was sort of the how I was sort of what I was raised to believe was that if you didn't work hard, like if you didn't work hard enough that you hated your job, then you weren't working hard enough.
Right. Like if you are a hard worker, you're going to put 110% into everything that you do.
Right. Whatever that means. Like you're going to sacrifice relationships.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know that this thing was important for me to go to, but I have to go to work.
Yeah.
Well, you fucking make pizzas, but it's my job. Yeah. Whatever. And well, but then that also like dovetails into that idea that when we were kids and we were coming up, like the American dream still existed. Like
so we thought.
The idea of it.
Yes, it was still
pervasively. It was like, yeah, man, fucking just.
It still lived in the collective consciousness.
Yeah. Follow your bliss. Do what you can be, whatever you want to be. Do what you're supposed to do, as long as you work hard.
Yeah.
And there's like 10 other things that have to go right besides working hard. You have to do that.
Yeah. I remember it's funny that we didn't. I guess maybe it's not funny. Maybe it's just indicative of how pervasive that idea is. But I think of something like, for some reason, the first thing that popped into my mind was Hook, where Robin Williams is like a big lawyer or whatever the fuck, and he's like not paying attention to his kids,
right?
Because he's tied to work the whole time, and the whole movie is about him being untethered from that.
It breaks my heart that Steven Spielberg is not immeasurably proud of that film.
Yeah, he really doesn't like it very much.
And it's like, dude, don't be so greedy, dude. Like, don't be mad because like the year prior you did Jurassic Park and Schindler's List. Nothing's gonna follow that up. Calm the fuck down. I've watched Hook more than I have watched those other two movies combined.
I love Hook.
I do too.
Unabashedly.
And I love Jurassic Park and I love Schindler's List. I love all of those movies. But Hook, man, that movie's real important to me.
Yeah. Yep.
I didn't see myself in Schindler's List. You know what I mean?
Or Jurassic Park, really.
No. Like, they're incredible movies. Like, I mean, Schindler's List did have a profound effect on me, and I watched it more than probably one should have. Like I shouldn't have been like as interested in that movie as I was when I was like 12 or something. But incredible movie.
Either way, Spielberg, incredible run, especially right there.
Of course.
Of course.
So Hook, the whole point of the whole thing is like play with your fucking kids.
Right. Like throw the fucking cell phone in the snow and play with the kids and all that shit. But like that's even my point was like even seeing stuff like that and me having watched that as a kid and seeing that example given to me of like this is what you should do. But he was also, you know, I don't remember in this.
He's a lawyer.
Yeah, he was a lawyer, but like I don't remember in the story like was he a college grad? Was he go to Harvard or some shit? Did he have
for sure?
You know,
some shit.
All of these things that had to have gone right for him that we didn't see.
For us, that there's nothing that felt relatable about, you know, Peter's character or Robin Williams' character because like that was a different world, like class conscious wise.
Well, for me it was more like I could end up there one day. I don't know how.
I see what you're saying.
But maybe. Right? Or more to the point, like this is just somewhere where you can end up.
I got you.
And then the whole thing of like you can be whatever you want to be is just like that's just a place I could end up probably.
Yeah, I could do that if I wanted.
Exactly.
I could do that if I wanted.
Yeah.
You know, like that was I mean, they literally told us when we were it's like check this out. This is a core fucking memory that I have. 3rd grade, okay? My dad's been dead for like 2 years maybe, okay? And it's like career day or whatever. And because, you know what I mean?
3rd grade?
In 3rd grade!
What the fuck?
I know it was 3rd grade because I remember who my teacher was. And because I remember what this bitch said to me. Anyway, so like she, or, you know, it's like... You're supposed to like dress up as what you want to be, right? Which asking like fucking 3rd graders to do that.
Everyone just came to school as cops and astronauts and shit,
and doctors and you know some shit like that. I'm gonna cure cancer, all sorts of shit like that. And like, I dressed up in my dad's like work clothes. Like I had like his jacket from like Champion Paper Mill, and I had like his work lunch kit.
Oh
Champion,
my God, dude!
You know,
no.
And I was like, I want to work at the paper mill like my dad did. And she's like, well, I guess that's fine if that's all you want to do. Like sub shit like that.
Get fucked, lady. Wow.
And it's like. They're like, if you gave me like, if you're like, hey Richard, you can take this 40-year-old consciousness and go and slip it into your past self.
At any point in time.
At any point in your past life. For 5 seconds.
Just enough time to retort.
That might be if I could only pick one, that would be on the list to be like, excuse me, bitch, don't you teach 3rd grade at Dayton fucking Texas?
Oh wow, man.
Is this the highest you can reach, you fucking cunt?
Did you dress up as this when you were in 3rd grade?
Right, what did you dress up as in 3rd grade?
Yeah.
Because you don't look like an astronaut or a doctor to me.
Oh.
You look like you make $28K a year.
Like,
and then like,
sorry, 3rd grade Richard, you're gonna have to deal with the fallout.
Yeah,
of this.
then I sit back.
Yeah, but it's gonna be worth it in like 30, 25 years or whatever. I swear.
Right. Then I end up here. Then I end up having like a random conversation, like, and then like with someone, they're like, "Man, you remember the time in 3rd grade? Whenever our teacher beat you,
you got fucking backhanded by Miss So and So." Man,
you had to go to the hospital. She lost her job, but man, you didn't walk right for 2 years.
Spun you around like 5 times. Hell of a shot.
But yeah,
that might
like,
be worth it, yeah.
So, but yeah, it was just that whole. I think it's
Today, by the way, everyone would come dressed up as a YouTube video. Oh,
man, I think that is, in some ways, I think that is, there's something more healthy about that than dressing up as, you know, a doctor or an astronaut or whatever. Not that I don't think doctors and astronauts are awesome. Yeah. But like,
it all just lives in this weird problem space of like, to be successful at this. For those other things, you have to like have a lot of shit go right for you to be able to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, for a YouTuber, as a successful YouTuber, you have to have 1 in a trillion luck.
Sure.
And that's the problem there, really.
Yeah, but
anyone can do it, but not successfully.
Right.
So,
and there's also like there's not as much like, you can try being a YouTuber for a year and then be like, you know what, man, this isn't worth it, and you're not like
and you didn't sink. Yeah, you're not multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars in student debt or anything.
Right. You don't have to like go on a 8-year, 10-year schooling journey.
Yeah.
And then start doing the job and then be like, oh, this sucks, but I have to keep doing it because I have $400,000 in debt.
That you don't have to get from attempting to be a YouTuber.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know how to come back from that. I'll figure it out in a second. Yeah, I mean, yeah. But cause I don't know. This like begs the question, right? Let me frame this in another way, because I was saying, like, I think like if I was a 3rd grade teacher and I saw someone come up, you know, it's like, oh, this kid wants to be a YouTuber, I'd be like, cool, man, have fun. You know, if you don't like that, then, you know, you can find something else to like pay the bills if you enjoy doing that, whatever. And like, I don't know. It's not I'm going to I would give a kid shit that was saying they were going to want to be a doctor. This is what I'm really saying. Okay. I think it is immoral to ask fucking high schoolers what they want to be.
Yeah.
I think it is obscene and grotesque to ask 3rd graders.
Absolutely. Yes.
And to flip that around another way and say it and phrase it in a different way is that if someone asked Max that, what would make me feel proud? Like, what answer could he give that would make me feel proud as his parent? And I think if he said something like, if he said something like really clever and like silly, that would make me really happy. Like,
just like made a joke out of it, basically.
Yeah, like, what do you want to be? Like, I want to be a watermelon, you know, or like some shit like that, you know, or like I want to be on top of a mountain. like misunderstands the question but answers the question that he thinks you asked sincerely.
Sure.
Like that would make me happy. Or if he said, like, I don't know, I want to be not. I want to be. I don't know. It's a hard thing to say, like, because, you know, like, oh, what would make me happier is if he said some shit like, oh, well, I want to be a good dad, or I want to be a good friend, or I want to be a good, you know,
or like if he had some aspiration and he said, this is what I really want to, and you knew it was something that he wanted to do.
Yeah. Or I want to be good at music. I want to be good at football, or I want to be good at a thing, like,
yeah,
you know, because that is a thing that is like, I think it's unique to American society. That's like, what do you want to be?
Mm-hmm.
That's like a existential philosophical thing.
Yeah.
Be, not like, what would you like to do to make money when you grow up?
Right. Because that assumes that it's your identity then.
Right.
Is what it is.
Because how you make your money is your identity in a capitalist society, which we are. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it assigns this much more grave importance to the decision that you're asking a third grader to make.
Yeah.
Or someone Max's age, you know? Like
someone asked him that on a fucking walk the other day. Someone asked him what he wanted to be. Like,
okay. But
like,
no one in a position of power. So you can
no.
Get the fuck out of my way.
But it's just, it absolutely didn't anger me. You know, because man, fucking language is hard. And I if someone is speaking kindly to my kid,
that's enough for now.
Yeah, man, I don't want to give it. I don't want to give a shit.
yeah.
Past that, but it is interesting to sort of reflect on like this thing in the culture of how.
Well, because that's just what people say when they ask what job you want to do. Is what do you want to be?
Yeah,
and that's just what that means. To
right.
us, you know.
What I've started,
but the actual literal question is something very different when you start thinking about it like that.
It's a thing that comes up and that I think about a lot and that I'm honestly sensitive about. Because like, you know, like this whole like stay-at-home dad, make money on the side, doing side gigs and doing other stuff, you know, kind of thing is not a traditionally masculine role.
Yeah.
And it makes other people uncomfortable. And since it makes other people uncomfortable, it makes me uncomfortable. So I don't want to tell them, you know?
Right.
And so the coin goes one way or another where like sometimes I'll just fib, you know? Yeah. And I'll say I still have a job that I don't have anymore. Oh, you know, it's like, oh yeah, I work for a medical records company, or so, you know, like I work from home, you know, doing this kind of thing.
That's really all you need to say, I think.
And or blah 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 blah. But if I was like on my toes, what I should say is, what are you asking me? Are you asking me how I make money?
Yeah.
Or are you asking me who I am? Are you asking me what I am?
I think we both know the answer to that question.
Like, are you asking me how I make money? Because those are different answers.
Right.
It's like, you know.
But actually, people will judge you based on what you
absolutely
do. So
will.
sometimes it is the same question.
So what do you do? And it's like, well, yeah. I do my best to be a good dad, to be a good husband, and to be a good musician, and to make things that I like with people that I like.
Yeah,
that's what I do. Oh yeah, but
oh, you make money doing that?
So you know what's the money like for that? It's not.
Got insurance? Corporate insurance?
You know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a problem. Hopefully, that is something that, as more people begin to question that, becomes less of a thing, becomes phased out, I guess.
And like to put sort of for something that to put not put a pin in it, but something I want to drive home here is
put a finer point on it.
Is that so? I came across my dad's like pay stubs, okay, like when I was cleaning out my mom's house.
It took me a long time to realize what a pay stub was there. I mean, I've got my own, but yeah.
Right. So, you know, my dad like graduated high school in like 1974 and then just walked down the fucking street and started working at the paper mill. And in 6 years, he was making like the equivalent of like $70,000-$80,000 today if you adjust for inflation.
Fucking A.
I would have been absolutely content and happy to do that myself because my dad went on fishing trips. Like he had weeks off at a time.
Right.
He had a giant fucking garage. He could afford a fishing boat. All right. He had shit tons of guns for hunting trips. He started his own trophy business. Yeah, I guess you probably didn't know that. So yeah, like that, the practice room in the garage that we played for that fucking decade, that was supposed to be his workshop.
Whoa, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, like that big bench over on the side by the window.
Yeah.
That was gonna be his bench, and underneath there were all these trophy supplies and shit.
Right.
You know? Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense now that you lay it out there like that, yeah.
And yeah, like I literally like grew up trying to create in the rubble of my dead father's dreams.
Yeah. I guess so, huh? Fuck.
You know? But it's like he did all this while just being like a smart, motivated man that like showed up to fucking work on time. You know, supported his family, was able to buy the house that he wanted, was able to do all the shit.
Mm-hmm.
I would have been totally happy to do that. Like my dream job was just being a plain old fucking teacher. Okay? Right. And then, yeah, man, I do that 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. And then the rest of the fucking time, I do what the fuck I want.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that was my dream job. You know, so I don't want to, like, I was absolutely okay with working and working sincerely and working in a way that benefited my community, but it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to do that and then still have to have 2 roommates so that I can survive. Like if I you know, like if you're going to make me sacrifice this much, then I'm going to fucking at least do something that is benefiting me in the long run and that like makes me happy and that I can leverage for my own success and my own skill set.
Right.
You know, I'm not gonna like if you're gonna like make me work myself to the point of it affecting my entire life negatively, then I'm not gonna do it just for you. I'm gonna do it on my own terms.
Right. You're gonna get, if not the most out of it, then like something reasonably useful out of it.
Yeah, or like, you know, like,
get the most that you can out of it.
There's like a line. Oh, never mind. I'll fuck it up. Don't worry about it. So,
but like, having been at the job that I'm at now, we have like really good work-life balance.
Nice.
Whereas other places, it was like you need to be in the office these hours, whether you're doing something or not. You know, and now it's closer to like whatever you need to get done, if you can get it done whenever. Do other things if you can, or do kind of what you want.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'll ever be able to go back to that other shit.
Man,
because it's such a waste of time.
The jobs that I did that I really, really enjoyed and did really well at were the jobs where people just left me the fuck alone.
Yeah.
You know, like where they trusted me. It's like, okay, you know the math. I trust you to teach it to this college class. And I would bust my ass to do that because I care. And I cared about being a good math teacher. And I cared about my students doing well. And they were like, all right, you're doing great. Cool. So, you know what I mean? Like there wasn't.
Right.
Or same thing when I was teaching at a music school. I was like, man, you know, they were like, hey, your students love you and they stay.
What more can you ask for?
You know? So whatever you're doing's working.
Right.
You have a really great retention. Whatever you're doing's working.
Right.
And so I would work well in those environments, you know? And so like,
yeah, you feel good about being there at that point. Like you feel, if you're trusted, then.
Well, and it's like, it's almost like the way I felt at the time is it's like, I am a teacher and that is my job and like my purpose in this community, and this school or this college is just a venue.
Mm-hmm.
This is, you know, but you're allowing me to do what I'm supposed to do. Right. And this is sort of, there's an exchange here, right? Like you find the students and you handle the building and you supply the place. And so I'm happy for the cost to be split. You know what I mean? Like I'm happy for you to get the share that you get and for me to get the share that I get.
Right.
You know, I don't feel like I'm being, you know, cheated. That was how, you know, I looked at it at the time. But, you know, the other side of it is it's like, oh, well, whatever. It's, I don't know what I'm saying. Like, yeah, like you were saying about the whole like trust, right? Like I've enjoyed and done well in the jobs where I was trusted, where I felt like I was trusted.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, hey, I'm gonna get all this done by then, and they're like, cool. You know,
right. Or even just not being micromanaged into the ground. You
can't deal with that.
I can't deal with that.
Well, and it's not how the studies that we did for our degrees are not conducive to being micromanaged, you know?
Right.
Like, because you have to go bang your head against the wall to solve that math problem or whatever, or that programming problem for hours and hours and hours and hours on end. And that's just how it is.
Yeah.
It can't really be done any other way. You know, like the idea that now the work itself is this like someone's like making sure that you wrote the equation right that isn't even solved yet, you know. It's like
right. Even for like my line of work where that sort of thing is more applicable, I would argue, than what you were doing. There are still places that still take that approach, which is bad, but I think more often than not, and more as time goes on, it's like, are you someone who has like a decent grasp of the basics, but more importantly, like, are you willing to learn?
Right.
And that's a huge deal.
Right.
And are you capable of learning also?
For sure. And that in like teaching, I was always in this spot in teaching where it's like, okay, well, I know the material extremely well because that's what I focused on. You know, I didn't take any teaching classes while I was in college because I was of the philosophy that that the best way to be a good teacher is for you yourself to have spent a lot of time learning things that are very difficult for you. That's my philosophy on what it takes to be a good teacher. If you've never had to really, really struggle to understand a concept or a whole class of concepts, I don't know that you can be a great teacher. That's my opinion on this day. And because the way it felt for me was it's like, all right, well, I am really, really, really struggling with this particular problem, this particular subject, this entire class, right? Because there were certain math classes that I had a hard fucking time in.
Totally. I understand that.
And so knowing that I had a really, really terrible, difficult time with that, it's a lot easier for me, and knowing that there was a certain way that I had to look at it, a certain order that I had to get the concepts in so that it made sense to me.
And so that tells you that there are different ways to be able to look at it.
Right. And so then I can then take this concept of, you know, I had such a hard time understanding this thing and like, you know, differential equations or whatever. I can then port that same philosophy down to someone who's having a really hard time understanding long division, or someone who's having a hard time understanding multiplication, whatever.
Yep.
Basic algebra, whatever. And I can, it's not hard for me to empathize and understand that, okay, this little thing is hard for them. For whatever reason, it doesn't matter. And I just got to get them to, we just got to see where they're at, and we got to figure out the missing piece.
Right.
And whatever that is. And that's going to be different for da-da-da-da-da. Like, I don't need a core. I think it was more valuable for me to spend that extra time taking those immeasurably difficult courses than it was for me to have like, you know, like pedagogy classes and stuff like that.
Yeah, I got you. I see what you're saying. I agree with that. That makes a lot more sense to me.
Because I've been in tutoring labs like with other teachers, like at the college, like retired. Like these are like retired, like they taught school for decades, and then they're retired and they need something else to do, so they go and like volunteer, or they go to make some extra money tutoring at the college or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And I have seen like this multiple times, like these people say to a student, like that they're like they're not understanding like the distributive property or some shit, you know, and they're like, you're not trying hard enough, and like say that to them, and it's like,
it doesn't mean anything.
It means absolutely nothing. It means that you don't have any other tool in your kit.
Yeah.
As a teacher, as an educator, you have nothing else to offer.
Yeah, it means you're not teaching them well.
Like, except all you have is shame. All you have is like trying to motivate them. It's like effort isn't the issue.
Right.
It's understanding. It's gaps. It's conceptual gaps. It's, you know.
Right.
It's like da 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 da.
And then the other side of that is them saying, "Well, I'm just not good at it." And
right.
It's like, well, that's also not the case.
It's absolutely that's absolute horseshit.
You just don't know how to look at it correctly yet.
I mean, yeah, you're not good at it right now, but it's not because you can't ever be
sure
good at it.
You're not good at it the way that somebody told you to try to do it before.
And so like my read on it at the time, and again, this is some big like generalizing, like kind of borderline cosmic brain bullshit.
There are caveats, there are special cases, but
of course
I fully agree with your stance here.
My read on it at the time was, it's like, if you don't like lean in and find and like force yourself to like go down those paths that are really difficult for you, you know, then what do? You go to school and you're like, okay, well, math was really easy for me, I guess I'll go to college for math. Okay, this is still easy for me, I guess I'll go to grad school for math. Okay, cool. And then you're a professor teaching the thing that was always easy for you, and you don't understand how it can't be anything but easy to other people, because all you had to do was just all you had to do was try harder, and it worked.
Coming across people who for whatever reason were able to stumble into maybe that like happy path of just like, oh, this works, I'm just gonna keep doing it. Oh, this works, keep doing it. And then they get to a point where they're teaching other people how to do it, and then they have that attitude. Always blows my mind.
Yeah,
I didn't run into too many of them in my college experience, but there were certainly a couple where it's like, you don't get this, why don't you get this?
What do you mean you don't understand this?
Yeah.
And I mean,
wild.
Another a big aspect of teaching that a lot of people don't really get, I think, is that most ineffective teaching is done from talking over your audience.
Yes.
Not under.
Yes.
But there's this idea of like, well, I don't want to talk under you, or I don't want to talk over you. Hold on, wait. Blah, blah, blah. I don't want to undershoot your knowledge because that will feel like I'm disrespecting you.
Sure.
So I'm going to assume that you're here, and I'm going to talk to you like you're here because I want to show you respect. But it's like, yeah, but I'm a student. I'm paying to fucking be here. I'm down here. Talk to me like I'm down here.
Yes. Yes. And sometimes I think that is necessary because you've got to fucking get on with things. And I get that.
For sure.
But you're absolutely right. Like that, and that just goes for communication in general. Like,
sure.
Explaining anything to anyone anytime is like, you're assuming that they know something about it. They may not know fucking anything.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing and able to like go down to the basics and just be like, all right, this, and then this, and then this, and then the thing we're talking about.
Right.
And that's so much more important than taking a teaching course or whatever.
Yeah. Now, I will say, in defense of pedagogy and teaching courses,
no,
since I'm
indefensible.
Since I'm taking this opportunity to shit on those things. After I had been teaching high school for a few years, and then I took some like seminars and some classes on like alternative certification. Since I already had all the data, on like the classroom management side of things, then whenever they do the presentation, they say the thing, and I'm like, oh yeah, that definitely doesn't work when I tried to do it. You're totally right. So I don't want to. I don't think that the information in those things is bad or anything like that.
Sure.
But I don't think I'm not trying to shit on pedagogy as a discipline and blah 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 blah.
There are useful things there for sure.
But I just
like with anything else.
Yeah. What I can say is that for a math degree, there's 2 paths laid out for you. Do you want to get a Bachelor of Arts and take a bunch of pedagogy classes and have the summers off and just be a teacher? Or do you want to get a Bachelor of Science and take all the hard courses? And like, it's laid out that way. Mm-hmm. Do you want to take the easy path and be a teacher?
Babies with a Bachelor of Arts.
Yeah.
No,
yeah. It's like, all right, well, you got Pascal too. Would you like to just do some easy things now?
I'm sure it's not that easy in some ways.
I'm
trying to give it the benefit of the doubt. You do what you want to do over there. I don't know enough about this to be able to say that.
Just that is like a specific example, and so it's like it's not. Well, I mean, and it's true. It's a reflection of culturally how we see the profession of teaching, societally how we see it. Of the shit in Florida right now, where it's like, oh, just let veterans teach,
right?
Or let veterans' wives teach, or some shit like that. Like we're just gonna give them certifications because we're that short on teachers.
Yeah,
like
right. I forgot all about that. Dude. Like, listen, no disrespect to veterans, but how did you come to that conclusion?
Yeah, don't pay teachers more. Like, don't do that.
Don't incentivize people to start doing it. No.
Because this is the thing: is like you can have a degree, be really smart, and still be a fucking dog shit teacher, man. And so like but man, this is the thing I can say too, is that there was in the math classes that I was teaching at the level that I was at, because I was in this weird spot where I had like almost like course load wise, I had, like half of a master's degree, but it wasn't as like graduate credits. So I was always teaching like the intermediate courses, right?
Okay.
Anyway, I had like a depth of knowledge that wasn't proportional to my peers, in some ways. But I can tell you, man, like it made a difference, because if you ask one of them why does it work that way? They would say like, well, because this is how you do it.
Because that's how I learned it.
Yeah.
Like
they don't, and
Sure.
and I would have answers for that, because I knew what mathematics was. Like I and so there's no way that. So anyway, you're not gonna have people like that aren't that don't have a degree, because you have to be trained by people who know the shit inside and out and can test you on those things and can pull you through the fucking coals. You know what I mean? Like, would you let those veterans do fucking like, it's like, all right, well, just do basic training yourself and then report to duty and we'll send you overseas. Would you let them do that? Oh no, man, I gotta, no, dude, I got 12th grade reading level. Just give me the manual. I'll basic train myself, and then I'll see you on the flight over there.
Oh, did I do the training? No, I read the manual though. Like it's probably fine, right? It's probably enough. I didn't like go sweat and shit. No,
I didn't go sweat and shit.
No. Man, that's just. Let's try to solve this problem that we created in this other fucked up way.
Yeah.
By doing it this other fucked up way.
I don't. Yeah. It's
wow.
But the thing though, maybe if I was forced to say something constructive about that idea, is that like there might be something really useful to this idea of stripping it away from all of the like the political BS, right? Or all of that, you know. You know, maybe it is kind of fucked up that you have to have a bachelor's degree to be able to teach anything, to be able to be any type of teacher at a school and have that kind of hands-on interaction with your community and get paid and have some type of livelihood with it.
Sure.
You know? So maybe there's ways that, you know what I mean? That
I don't think this is the way to do it, but I see what you're saying.
Yeah, you don't need to like, let's just get this guy to teach math who doesn't know math. You know, like you don't need to do that. But like,
yeah,
it would be nice if there were ways that people in the community who did not have bachelor's degrees could still contribute in a school setting if they wanted to.
Or were able to.
Yeah, like in a way that like they're qualified and competent to do so.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Definitely. That's not the conversation they're having.
No, it's not.
But
I see. Tangent. It's a tangent. I'm not.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm just trying to like make it clear that I'm not saying like, you shouldn't be allowed to talk to children unless you have a bachelor's degree.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah. Or veterans can't teach.
No, man.
Not even close.
That's not it.
Not even
like
close.
why veterans? Like why not some other group?
That's what I'm saying. They're trying to solve a fucked up problem in another fucked up stupid way.
Yeah. Well, that was a lot longer than I thought it would be.
We even cut part of it off at the beginning.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. So.
And one small section out of the middle. Before we go on, can we take a quick break?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I didn't expect that whole pedagogical thing. So we do have a topic for today.
Against all odds, we do have a topic.
Against all odds. One of these days, I don't know, it's gonna happen. We're just gonna be like, hey man, let's just see what happens.
Well, if Jennifer fucking comes over here, then yeah, we can.
Yeah, that's probably not.
Feel free
happen.
to do that. Yeah, well. Fair.
So you probably didn't anticipate it, but I do have props today.
Ooh. I didn't.
So.
I mean, so to be fair, I realized after I sent the document, I was like, I didn't really give a lot of context for a lot of this stuff, and I figured I'd just leave it at that and just see what happens.
Yeah. So we're talking about synthwave music today, which Robert is the guide on this journey. So, but I do have props. So
nice. So we got stronger things.
Yeah, which is okay, fine,
cool.
And I got here we go. Make it fun. Because I think one of them you're gonna get a kick out of. So that's Perturbator. Because that's the new model EP, which is one of my favorite pieces of music ever.
Damn.
Yeah, that's a big deal to me.
Hell yeah.
I was listening to that a lot when we were recording and mixing the Small Deal record.
Oh wow.
So it actually had a big influence on the track order and how I wanted the album to flow. Yeah, big.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Would not have expected.
And then this one I thought you'd maybe get a kick out of.
Whoa, yeah, man, that's cool. This is the soundtrack to the Michael Mann movie Thief, starring James Caan.
Yep.
But soundtrack by he died like a couple of weeks ago or something like that, not too long ago. But yeah, soundtrack by Tangerine Dream.
So, fun story with this, right? I got this at a record shop in Austin because I was there like visiting my in-laws. Or my father-in-law, and I was like, all right, I gotta get out of here. So, I mean, we've been there for a few days, and I was like, I'm just gonna go down. I mean, this is a really, really cool record shop if you're ever in Austin. End of an ear.
Yeah.
Really, really cool. So, but yeah, I was in there, and I was like, gathering up all sorts of shit. They always have like a very well curated, like everything in there in every section is really good.
Good selection.
But I was like, what is this? Like when I went to check out, I was like, what is this play? And they're like, oh, it's this. It's this. I was like, can I buy that? They're like, sure thing, man.
No, wait, did they have another copy or did they sell you the copy?
No, they like,
oh, that's good.
And
that's great.
And so I hadn't, like I heard it. I didn't have any context other than like I heard it in this fucking record store and I thought it was cool.
Right.
And then I get back to the house with it, and my father was like, so what'd you get? and I show him and he was like, in his way, he was like, I fucking love Tangerine Dream. He's like, that's an amazing movie. That soundtrack's amazing. Tangerine Dream's awesome.
Dude.
Yeah, I have
Word.
I have like the coolest father-in-law that ever exists.
Oh man.
Somehow.
You chose well.
Yeah, it really like I'll never like I have a very like
that link is now made.
Yeah, and it has almost nothing to do with the actual music. It's just with like this funny like this happenstance little string of events, of like I like that. Here you go. And then my father-in-law being like, so
fucking love that.
Yeah,
that's good. That's great.
So I was tickled to see them on this list.
Right.
All right. Yeah.
So yeah, there's a few aspects to this whole thing. There's the playlist itself, and then there are a number of other links that I kind of dropped in here.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything you want to start with necessarily?
I don't know
about all this stuff. Okay.
I have a lot.
Okay. Well, let's just say you asked me how many episodes I saw this being,
right? Mm-hmm.
And I could do another couple episodes on this probably if we really wanted to, but I figured what I'd do for this is just keep it confined to one episode and just try to do like a sort of basic, because I didn't know how the fuck much you knew about this at all. I didn't bother asking. I figured we could just sort of say like, here's a basic overview of what synthwave quote unquote is, basically where it came from, and then some of what I like about it and what I've gotten into is what the playlist I would make, and that's kind of what I came up with here. So like a little bit of history in there, and then there's just like a lot of stuff that I've discovered that I got way into.
That makes sense. And let's because I have a lot of sort of like I don't want to say speculative, but maybe that's the best word. Speculative questions to like ask you and pick your brain about.
Okay.
But I think we'll go with what you said.
Okay. So there are a few other things on here like I haven't asked either. Did you watch that documentary?
I did. Absolutely, I did.
Excellent. I watched it again today.
It's so good.
It's really good.
It's a really, really great documentary.
I started watching it and I was like, this seems kind of goofy, like the whole storyline thing they got.
Oh, sure.
But then as it went on, and then like John Carpenter shows up, and I was like, this is great.
John Carpenter's so cool.
So well. He's the coolest. He's the coolest. Oh man, he's so cool.
I don't know if it's possible to be any cooler than John
It
Carpenter.
Absolutely isn't, and it's like on full display here.
So maybe this would make sense too, is like as a general, because one of the things you put in this link was like the essential like synthwave. So
yeah, so there's a I think there's probably a few different subreddits that have to do with synthwave, and this one in particular was Outrun, which is like a sub genre of synthwave, which we'll get to that. Like synthwave in and of itself is like a very nebulous, if unaccepted term for this music, but it is kind of what people know it as. It's one of those things where like it didn't mean that for a lot of people in it, and it didn't mean that for a long time, but now it's meant that for so long to so many people that's
what it is.
What it means now.
They mentioned that in like the document, like we were just making music that we liked, and then all of a sudden around 2010 we were synthwave.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, synthwave as a term, as a genre is relatively new.
Right.
Because this shit's been going on in certain ways for 40 years, it turns out. Like strangely. Or in pockets of time within that time frame, let's say.
Right, that is the interesting thing about it, is that it seems like synthwave, like when is synthwave music made? And it's like it is made up till 1982 and then not again until 2008 or something, you know.
It's made when you watch a movie that makes you feel a certain way.
Right.
Is when it's made.
yeah. The synth wave was the journey all along.
But yeah, so I came across some pretty good brief explainer, some sort of explainers on the subgenre breakdown for synthwave and the subgenres within it. And big cool graphics that are like, these albums are this is dark wave, this is skate wave, or whatever the fuck it was,
or like our pop, or like, you know, like the ones that are more vocal based and whatever. And there's so many, and it was I so my two big associations are like where my reference frame, right, is I was familiar with Perturbator. They're the even though I'm not extremely familiar with all of his catalog, I have a very intense relationship with that one particular record. And then because I got into that, I branched out a little, but nothing else. I didn't get very far. But I knew about like Ghost, and I knew of, you know, Ghost, and I knew about Carpenter Brute or whatever. And then you introduced me to Dance of the Dead. You know, all those years ago when we did a proto version of this.
Right.
And then you also introduced me to Kavinsky on there and the song Nightcall, which I developed an infatuation with that song.
A lot of people did. You're not alone.
There might not be a more perfect, like, special angsty boy song than that one.
Yep.
Like,
it's built into the character of that whole guy.
Yeah.
Actually,
there's something about you,
man.
And you're like, yeah, I'm very special. Yeah. And then also last year, I somehow, for whatever reason, got into the band The Midnight.
Okay, cool.
And so one particular record of theirs that I've just like worn out. And I can't remember what it is, the title of it, but it's relatively recent.
So it's interesting. So over the years, you've kind of found these little pieces of it, and then got super into it.
Yeah,
like you found one little inlet, and like dug way deep, and then just came right back up, and then kept going.
Yeah, a little bit.
Because what I did was like I found that, but then I like started pulling and sampling from everywhere, and extremely broad reach throughout.
Right, like I would tend to find an album that I like, and I would get into that album, you know. So
right.
Endless Summer is the
Midnight album.
Yeah, that I love, and but something that I think is really interesting is, you know, while I was like looking up their stuff. Okay, so this is like a Wikipedia blurb from them. It's like the band's motto is "Mono no Aware." So it's Japanese, and it's a Japanese phrase that loosely translates to a sense of nostalgic wistfulness and the awareness that nothing lasts forever. And so in that Rise of the Synths documentary, like the first movement of it is really just asking all these people, like, so what the fuck is it?
Yeah.
And almost all of the definitions involve 80s and nostalgia.
Yep.
You know, and
answers coming from a lot of people who didn't even live through the time.
Yeah. Which honestly makes sense, because I don't think it didn't seem like there was a lot of like, how to say it? There's not a lot of Gen Xers that were making synthwave.
Not a lot, no.
Because they're like, yeah, it sucked.
Yeah.
Like if you were there and you weren't just consuming the pop culture that it created, right?
Yep.
But anyway, so that's like my reference frame. It's always been a sound that I liked and that I was aware that it was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
But for whatever reason, I could never really, really find my footing in it. You know?
You just like never felt a need to go out looking, really?
Well, I mean, I would a little, but it would just, I mean, you know, I'll put on random synth, you know, find a synthwave playlist and I'll listen to it and, oh, that's cool.
Right.
But for whatever reasons, those explorations wouldn't, it just never got super intellectual for me, I guess. It never got like, okay, so when did it start? When did it this? When did it da 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 da? I never dug for whatever reason.
Well, so I never really did that either until we were going to do this. So like I just found this documentary the other week or whatever.
So
and really dug into a lot of the history exactly until this.
So when did you become aware of it as a genre?
Probably right around 2011, 2012. So 2011 was when Drive came out. And 2012 was when Hotline Miami came out, which was the game.
Okay.
That had a number of the tracks that are on this playlist.
Okay.
Originally come from, that was the first place I encountered a lot of that stuff. And a lot of these artists. It's sort of, that was, for anyone who played video games but didn't watch movies, that was probably how they found out about synthwave. Because like if you didn't see Drive and you played video games, you probably found this somehow or another. And it was like a confluence of things. It was like the game was $10 at the time, which was like super cheap for 2012. Cheap games weren't a huge thing, and it was so different from a lot of other things. It was like very, very intense, and the soundtrack had a lot to do with that. But it wasn't that these artists were making songs for the game. It was just they took songs that they thought fit.
I see.
So when we did the video game episodes, I explicitly did not use any music from this game because it's just songs.
I see. It wasn't
It wasn't for the game.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But so yeah. What?
No, I'm laughing at the thought of like, today we're going to talk about video game OSTs, and we're just going to talk about the different radio stations on Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah. Here's a Rock Band playlist.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I mean, I'll talk about the Tony Hawk 2 soundtrack all day long, but let's not do that. It's not an interesting episode. So yeah, like 2011, 2012 is when I got into it, and like sort of really understood what it was, and like found Outrun, the Kavinsky album, or that didn't come out until a little bit later. Did it? That was 2013. Either way, that song was on Drive.
Right.
And so that was how I found out about him initially.
Gotcha.
But like this song I put on the playlist, like Testarossa Auto Drive, was from like 2006. It was like way earlier.
Gotcha.
And that was like one of the first examples. And then in the documentary, there are a few others who like 2008, 2007, kind of like the early stuff. And they go into like, MySpace origins and all this other shit.
Right.
So for a very long time, it was extremely underground. And like if you knew, you knew. If you were making it, you probably knew people who were making it, that sort of thing.
Right.
But it didn't grow into its own genre for a while longer.
Right. And it seems like there were a couple of watershed moments of cultural awareness of it. Drive.
Yeah. That's like everyone keeps coming back to that.
Right.
movie.
Which I haven't seen.
Really?
I haven't.
Oh, man. I almost thought about asking you and saying you should watch it if not. But
I meant to, but, time.
Yeah, that's fair.
And
I like it a lot.
I bet it's great.
I think a lot of people don't like it too much because it's extremely slow. And it's much like this music. It's very like atmospheric. It's like that's what it's about.
Got it.
Build up, tension.
Well, it's something that I've always been interested in and respected, I guess, because actually the first time I heard about it was like Harrison told me about it. Not too long after it came out, and he was like, "This movie's really, really good. And the music's really cool."
Yeah.
And so that was like sort of a, I don't know. I feel like I had an interesting, like I was close friends with, or well, because I was spending a lot of time around those guys like Harrison and Jacob. We were actually playing a lot of music together, and he and they're like 4 years younger than us, and so they. I don't know. I had like a peripheral awareness of like, oh, there's this like retro shit or whatever. And like, I probably had some snarky hot take about it at the time or whatever.
Right.
But then like the next thing was like when Stranger Things came out. And I felt like I recognized the sound design in it. Like I was like, oh, they're doing like that retro synthy thing that's real hip now.
Yeah.
You know.
So that was 2016.
Right.
Yeah, by that point I remember I was seeing people who like were into it be like, "Oh, this is going mainstream" or whatever the fuck it was.
Right.
So there was like both sides of it. Where it's like, "Oh, this is cool. There's more of this." And they're like, "Oh, fucking they're doing this shit." Or...
Right. This is this is the killer moment of it. This is our movement dies and and then like the whole and then Thor Ragnarok. That was like another.
Yep.
Well, whenever I saw like the trailer, maybe not even the trailer, but like when I saw that, and I was like, "Well, we have arrived.
This is just happening now."
This is, and like at first I like couldn't tell. I was like, "Is this sincere or is this hokey?" Like, I mean, in the way that they were treating it in Thor Ragnarok, like, are they trying to be hip or does this come from a genuine place? It's absolutely come from a genuine place.
Yeah,
Taika Waititi is awesome. Anyway. But yeah, so but I mean, but honestly, like to think of, you know, something having origins in 2006, like as a genre, 2008, and then in 2012 being in this hugely successful, acclaimed movie, you know, with Drive.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty quick turnaround.
Yeah. It's really weird. It's despite the documentary spanning like 4 decades, it feels like it happened very, very quickly.
Right. Well,
and so one of the other, well, I mean, in a way it did, but a lot of this stuff was planted in different ways over long periods of time, right?
Right.
Like whether explicitly through like the John Carpenter stuff back in the 70s and 80s. Among others, or, you know, through a lot of the stuff that I didn't bother referencing on here that I still do acknowledge as like inspirations and stepping stones along the way that they do in the documentary as well. Like you come along to stuff like Daft Punk in the 90s,
right?
Like late 90s, on to stuff like Justice, which I'm way the fuck into also.
What's Justice?
They're another French like electro techno duo.
Leave it to the French.
Precisely. If you learn one thing from this documentary, it's that the French know what the fuck they're doing.
There's a note in here where I said that. I was like, it's always the French.
It always is the French.
That's like one of my hot takes. Is it's like I only want to hear like post black metal if it's made in France.
Right.
Like no one else does it right.
Exactly.
I don't know what it is. You know what I mean? But like however they do it there.
Yeah. There's clearly something going on.
Well, there was something interesting that they said in the documentary, speaking specifically about France, and like the idea that it never became uncool.
Right.
And that really hit me because I do remember when we were kids, like the sound of a keyboard was absolutely uncool.
100%.
Unless it was 9 Inch Nails. That was it.
Yep.
Like,
which they go into in there as well.
Yeah.
They touch on that.
Like, do you remember the strife that it caused when I showed Jeremy's Soilwork?
Yep.
And
excuse me, an American Airlines commercial, I believe it was called.
Yeah, he said it. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what he fucking said.
Which I never fully understood. But
Right. Well, because to him, he heard like keyboard, he thought synth, he thought 80s, and he hated everything about the 80s.
That wasn't Metallica or Slayer, I guess.
Which that didn't seem 80s because that wasn't mainstream or whatever. But he hated like all
popular 80s.
He did, yeah. You know, which is there's also a really interesting thing too of I don't know what to call it, like a survivor bias almost, but like the stuff that's still relevant about the 80s now is the really, really good shit. The stuff that was still relevant about the 80s that was left over in like fucking 1995. You know, like there hadn't been enough time to really, you know, like we didn't for us to have an understanding, right, as teenagers at the time of like what was really amazing and unique about this decade and the music of this decade and whatnot, you know.
Well, there's also a difference there between what's relevant still and what's remembered still.
It's too good. Those are two good things to pit against, two ideas to pit against each other, relevant versus remembered.
Because like you're saying, a lot of shit did kind of fall away over time. But then a lot of the stuff that was popular that maybe helped these aspects of music become uncool, like the way that it got really poppy and, you know, like Madonna was using keyboards and all this other shit.
Sure.
Or whatever else, you know.
Whatever. Yeah, because I don't remember. Yeah, but like...
But you don't, because you don't remember.
There's a tsunami of bad music that's no longer relevant, that we don't remember.
Right.
Because it's been 30 some odd years or whatever. But it was still remembered in 1995.
Yeah.
And so then, like, the thing that I had said, the whole purpose of this podcast, the whole show, all of it, was just for me to accidentally say the phrase that what makes something feel dated is if people stop doing it. It's like my one contribution. But like, so like there becomes, you know, like if you have these things that are okay, well, I remember this music being hacky and this or whatever and blah blah blah, and whatever sort of trappings are associated with it, you're going to associate those trappings with how you feel about that music, like those elements, even if those elements have been used in amazing ways on other great music,
right?
You know, and so you get a bunch of us like loud ass kids in the 90s, and we didn't want to fucking keyboard anywhere fucking near what we were making.
Yeah.
You know,
or just like anything that had been popular in the last few years, really. Like,
yeah,
because hair metal down the fucking drain.
Oh god, we didn't want any fucking part of that.
Yeah.
You know, like it wasn't just like the sound of a synthesizer that we didn't want a part of, but it was, you know, it was like
it was the connotation with all the shit that had been using it.
Right. But yeah, we didn't want a part of hair metal either. You know, there was a lot of shit we didn't want a part. We didn't want a part of grunge though either. Even though we couldn't. I can see now there was a lot of that we couldn't even. You couldn't separate yourself from it if you tried. If you were our age, you know.
Yeah.
But like in that documentary they talked about like in something, you know, a segment where they talk about like, you know, in France it was like, well, it never became uncool, and it definitely became uncool here.
Yes,
for a time.
Yeah, so that did make me wonder like what the music scene looked like at the time then, because that kind of makes it apparent that, well, I guess the only thing that makes it apparent is that they didn't react to the grunge movement the way that we did, and so that begs the question, like, was it a thing there really?
I wonder too,
I don't know
if there's a different awareness of, because what did happen in the 90s was for our generation in like a pop culture sense was this awareness of techno and then later rave music.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if, because I don't know, maybe they're just more educated and more aware of like electronic music as a whole and like the different subgenres and the different things, all the different things that electronic music can do. and like acid and house and all that sort of stuff that I don't fucking know that I do not understand.
Yeah.
That I'm ignorant of. Whereas we were like, oh well, if it doesn't have like guitars and live drums, then it's techno. Or if you dance to it, it's techno. You know, we had a very limited understanding of that. And so
it just wasn't pushed over here in the same way.
I was talking about this the other night of me and Allison. I don't know. Someone came out. I was like, you know, she was like, yeah, the 90s were weird, and I was like thinking about it. I was like, yeah, like the 90s were kind of almost in a strange way. The 90s were like the last decade that the music industry, maybe like the movie industry to a lesser extent, but the music industry had firm control over all the levers of influence that it had spent the past decades working to acquire.
Right.
It's like you could still like decide what was going to be popular. You could still like steer people's tastes however you want it, you know, and well, this is what's going to be on MTV. This is what people are going to see. This is what, you know what I mean? Like they still had all those things were systems of power were still very much in place.
Yeah. Definitely.
And it was, you know, pre-internet basically.
Pretty much. Yeah. Because I remember how I found out about like techno and shit in the 90s was because of like at 2 a.m. on MTV on like Saturday night or whatever, AMP would come on. And they would just play like an hour of fucking bizarre techno videos, most of them British and probably a lot of them French actually. But they would play stuff like Future Sound of London or The Prodigy or Orbital or whatever the fuck else.
Right.
And that was how I found out about that stuff. But it was a weird thing that they did at 2 a.m. on Saturday or Sunday night or whatever it was.
Right.
And you had to go find that stuff. If you,
Right.
you know, they weren't putting it on, it was like TRL, you know, time slots or whatever.
Exactly.
And then they stopped doing it after a while. But it was weird and it was like interesting and it was completely different to anything that was on the radio or regular MTV rotation here.
Right, and
so it was very intriguing.
And it was like truly like one thing, like electronic music,
Yes.
like all this one thing.
Yeah, for all the like weird subgenres and what am I trying to say? All the little differences in there,
Right.
You know,
Like
they just put it under the one. It was techno. It was
like the Prodigy, Lords of Acid, and Aphex Twin are all the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
And Daft Punk, that's all the same shit.
Yes.
You know, it's all techno.
Yeah.
And so
they didn't have the vocabulary to point out the subtleties or care about them.
Right. And so anyway, I feel like there's something more in depth there, but I don't know how to get to it. But okay.
But yeah, anyway, to get back to what I was saying a minute ago, like there are things like Daft Punk that were happening in the 90s, leading into like Justice through the 2000s, early 2000s, that like to me have very clear inspirational lines you could draw to what synthwave would become.
I see.
Over time. And then something else I put on that list that I'm kind of surprised that they didn't point to any game influences in this documentary, especially since John Carpenter is involved, and he is bizarrely a huge gamer.
No shit.
So, quick side tangent on that. Something I forgot initially, but added to my own notes, was that in 2013 and 14, this website that I always reference, Giant Bomb, the video game coverage, they do their yearly like game of the year lists, and they get a bunch of guests to come in and like give us a top 10 list, and we'll publish it on the site and add whatever notes you want. And in 13 and 14, one of the dudes who worked there was like way into movies, and he like shot an email to John Carpenter. He was like, "Fuck it, maybe he'll answer." And sure enough, John Carpenter's like, "Here are my favorite games," and like just like the most bullshit like surface level things, but you can tell he played games. But he was just like, Dragon Age Origins, it's great. And that was like kind of all he said about it. But he just gave all these like Borderlands 2. Like, And
Yeah.
but he responded with this list of games, and he's always been a big advocate, and he's like, I want to make a horror game and all this stuff. But so he's bizarrely into that world as a fan.
That's so cool.
It's pretty cool. As if he wasn't cool enough already.
Yeah, he didn't need any more cool points. But,
yeah, exactly.
You know.
But anyway, I'm surprised they didn't touch on games because Hotline Miami was a huge deal for a lot of these artists, especially.
I see.
Kind of blowing up. But then also in 2002, I think, was when Grand Theft Auto Vice City came out.
Right.
And that was like, especially from what I remember, it was the first big cultural milestone of like, look at the 80s. Wasn't this cool? Because it was heavily styled off of Miami Vice and Scarface. And all of the radio stations were just playing 80s shit. And it was great. And so for someone like me who had just come out of I born in 83, so kind of grew up in the 80s hearing a lot of that music. But then we moved on into the 90s, and for us, all that stuff was immediately, like we said, very uncool.
Right.
To like see that presented in a cool light, and then just like, here it is, enjoy this, and then be able to get into it and go, oh, actually, a lot of this stuff is pretty damn cool. That was like a huge turning point of like, the 80s, maybe no longer super uncool. Actually, a lot of this is really cool. And I think that, even though they don't reference it in here, I think that probably had a lot of influence. Because a lot of these dudes are like seemingly about our age, if not a bit younger.
Right. And they were fucking 20 years old. They definitely fucking playing video games.
Almost assuredly so.
And if they weren't playing, because I didn't play those games because I was busy, because I was gigging, you know what I mean? And but I was still aware, you know what I mean? I was still aware of those games and aware of Vice City and whatnot, and aware of that, like, you know, because that is another thing, is that like when we were in school, like the 70s were the coolest fucking thing. Like that was not the 60s. But the 70s, that seemed to be the coolest fucking thing for whatever reason, you know? Yeah. I was like, my favorite band was Black Sabbath, and people were wearing bell bottoms.
Yeah.
And they actually had there was a successful show called That 70s Show.
It's very true.
And so there's something, you know.
Yeah. And like, if you were into like rock and stuff, like, Led Zeppelin were gods, you know. That was just how that was.
Yeah, I don't. That one's a little harder for me to like put my finger on, because I didn't get Led Zeppelin for much later. I mean, don't get me wrong. I had Led Zeppelin 4. I bought that when I was in junior high. I was like, this is fucking incredible. But I wasn't trying to emulate it. You know what I mean? It wasn't mine.
Sure. I mean more in like just the public consciousness.
Yeah.
Or just people who were into metal or rock, or, you know, more generally.
Right, yeah.
But like, it was like taken for granted.
Yeah, and like the Grateful Dead was doing really, really well touring during this time also. It's like an interesting thing. Like, kids were going to fucking see the Grateful Dead all over the fucking place.
I didn't realize that.
You know? Shit like that. So it's... There's something, there's I don't know, there's a weird, like,
it's sort of known that there's like a sort of a two decade like lag time between when shit comes back around.
Right.
I think there's a name for that even. But yeah, that kind of lines up.
And so, you know, 2002 with Vice, that would be on schedule.
Yeah, if a little bit early even.
Sure.
But like, that's the first thing that I remember coming across where it's like, hey, remember the 80s? Shit was fucking rad. Whereas up until then, it was just like taken for granted that, remember that? That sucked. We just came out at that time.
Right. I think a lot of it too, because I think we were influenced, maybe not in sound, but in ethos, by like hardcore punk.
Yeah.
And hardcore punk was like, fuck Ronald Reagan and fuck the 80s.
Yeah.
And so I think that might have, and so that might have, maybe I'm speculating, like that might have been like Henry Rollins didn't talk about the 80s being cool, you know?
Yeah, maybe.
Some shit like that. I don't know though. I don't know. But
I think like even though we weren't Gen Xers, like I think that whole grunge revolution and that whole aspect of it had a big effect on us.
It absolutely did.
Because like growing up, like all my favorite movies were 80s movies.
Of course.
And I never stopped liking them, but at some point thinking about that time period like became uncool. And I think the people who like you sort of alluded to earlier, that maybe the people who were living through it and at that point were the people speaking in media to us had a lot more influence on that.
Right. And I can only speak to like the music side of it, you know, because I don't think I ever stopped liking any of the movies.
I didn't either. I don't think
I ever stopped watching them either.
Yeah.
Like Ghostbusters was never not cool.
No, that's still one of the best movies ever made.
But there was definitely like a feeling of like, you know, oh, well, fucking Tears for Fears definitely sucks. You know, Depeche Mode definitely sucks. You know, like that, there was definitely that kind of feeling. You know, Huey Lewis in the News definitely sucks.
Huey Lewis definitely sucks. I like Depeche Mode a lot.
Depeche Mode's amazing.
And always did.
Yeah. No. I did too. I bought their Violate CD from the fucking trainer, like at the fucking high school. He was selling a bunch of CDs, and I was like, I'll take Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey and Depeche Mode. But yeah. Anyway, yeah, because we being born in 1983 and like coming of age right after the grunge explosion, we're in just this exact right time for us to not be aware of what it was really like before it. So we just woke up like in the kind of as in the like somewhere near the crest of the wave.
Yeah.
And so it was all we knew in a sense.
Yeah. That makes sense.
But yeah, like I really like the some of these definitions and some of the things they said in the documentary, like the illegitimate child of new wave and metal.
Yeah, that really tracks because, well, for one thing, a lot of these guys seem to have come from metal, which I would not have necessarily expected. But thinking about a lot of not necessarily everything on this playlist, but a lot of the stuff that I do like about a lot of this music, it's very driving like metal is in the same way.
Right. I mean, that's how I found out about Perturbator, is because he's covered in the metal press.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Especially more whenever the label he was on, Blood Music, was more active, because they did a lot of metal stuff too. Okay. They were like synthwave or dark synth or whatever, and metal. Like those were the two things they would do. Like they did like a Strapping Young Lad box set. They did an Emperor box set.
Damn.
They did all sorts of really, really cool shit way back in the day. And I got to be a fan of that label. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I was like, okay, well, what's this Perturbator band on this fucking label? You know what I mean? Like
anything they put their name on is probably gonna be pretty quality.
Yeah. Like, and so that would show up on like metal news sites and stuff like that, like a new Perturbator album, blah 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 blah. You know, new Ghost album, GOST.
Yeah.
You know, Carpenter Brute. You know, like so these bands were getting coverage in the metal press. Like there was an overlap.
Right. I mean, on some level, it makes sense to me because you listen to some of Carpenter Brute shit. It is like fucking intense, like metal can be.
Right.
Just not using the same instruments or styles or anything.
Right. It's a different toolkit.
Yeah.
That's different, but then it leans so heavily on the atmosphere, which not necessarily a lot of the metal that we played or that like we overlap with, that isn't necessarily huge in the atmosphere, but black metal is all atmosphere.
Right.
You know, and so it makes sense that there's overlap there as well.
Yeah. So there's a sort of a larger point to that. Well, not that exact point you're making, but there was a weird parallel and a disconnect for me between forms of extreme metal and this type of music, where if I look at, this is not to do with what we were just talking about exactly, but just sort of tangentially related. Like, I was thinking about, I look at like the names of metal of extreme metal bands, the things that they call their albums, the song titles they use, the sort of themes that they go for. And a lot of times, more often than not, I look at it and I'm like, that's kind of fucking goofy.
Mm-hmm.
And so something about that reads to me as more goofy than not. I can look at a lot of synthwave related stuff and stuff in this sort of sphere, and more often than not, I'm like, that's pretty cool. But it's really just the same dumb comic book shit.
Yeah.
On both sides. And I'm like, what is it about that somehow to me makes that alluring? And then the stuff over here, I'm just like, obviously not. I don't know. I don't have an answer for it. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, to me, there's a lot of like, I think, I don't know that I've never come across a genre of music that had, like, metal and synthwave seem to be the only two styles that have so many well-defined subgenres. You know? And again, I don't know why that, because it's, I do know why, because it's a bunch of fucking nerds.
Bunch of nerds. Yeah,
making
that's
this fucking music.
That's the reason. Yep.
Like,
and since so many of these people came from metal, it stands to reason.
Yeah. Like I was skimming a Wikipedia article and I was like, what the fuck is fash wave? I was like, it must mean fashion, right? Please tell me it's fashion. It's not.
No. No, it's not.
It's like, but
fascist wave.
Yep.
Is what it is.
Yep.
Yeah. Of course.
And then you're like, you know, people initially thought it was just like another ancillary meme wave subgenre like Trump wave. And I was like, what is this sentence that I just read?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing about these subgenres, like how they spring up, is like any one artist can just do a thing and then all of a sudden that is a new avenue.
That's a thing. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so to get back to like these sort of explainer images that I added in here that sort of breaks these things down into subgenres, all of that shit to me is meaningless. I just wanted to put it in here as an example of what all, like, the sort of variety that there can be. To me, all of this shit just falls under the same umbrella, and I don't care to go any further than that.
Gotcha.
And I like stuff from all of those groupings.
It is useful to sort of, for me, as like a noob, if you will, to see these things lined out, because I am kind of loosely familiar with some of these things.
Yeah.
And so to sort of see like, okay, Outrun, like Kavinsky is in this Outrun thing, and that's different than what Perturbator and Carpenter Brut is, because that's in the dark synth thing.
Right.
Okay, and Dan Terminus and whatnot, and then it's like, okay, well, what's that other group though? Oh, the Midnight. Okay, yeah, synth pop vocal. That makes sense. Yeah, all right, that is different.
Yeah,
and it does help.
And it's not that there aren't differences. Like, if you look at these groupings and listen to these artists, or like just know some of this music, it's very clear that there are differences. Like, I find myself listening to like a lot of dark synth related stuff. Like, you got
your metal shows.
You got like Daniel Deluxe in here. Dance with the Dead is in here. Carpenter Brut, because it's a lot of like minor key. Like, it sounds like you're listening to a fucking John Carpenter score.
Right.
A lot of times, the stuff in Outrun is always like car related, or it sounds like you're hauling ass down the road.
Right.
In as much as it can, you know.
Yeah.
Like, I'll find myself listening to like a fucking Laserhawk album, and I'm like, look down, and I'm doing like 90. I'm like, whoa.
Nice.
It works. It's effective.
I would find excuses to drive at night.
Yeah.
When I was really into that new model, that record, I was like,
yeah. It's there's something there.
It's like, oh, I think I need to. I need to go get something from the store. I need to go get something from the HEB in Mont Bellevue.
Yeah.
I'll be back in 2 hours,
Yeah.
Allison.
Oh, HEB's just right up the street. Another one like 2 towns over. I need to go to that one actually.
I need to traverse 5 zip codes so that this album can play exactly 3 times through.
Yeah. So yeah, it's not that these groupings are meaningless. It's just that I like so much of this stuff that for me, I just kind of don't care.
I hear what you're saying.
I'm never going to go looking for a new dark synth album or whatever.
I got you. Yeah, and I mean, and honestly, I feel similarly about metal. I mean, there's places that I tend to nestle, you know what I mean? But I'm not exclusive. You know, you know what I mean? I don't. And some people are, and those people are crazy to me. That are like, only like death metal. I don't like black metal, you know.
Yeah, I only like shred wave. I stay away from REDM or yuppie wave.
Yeah. So, but these definitions they throw out, some of this stuff is so interesting, like forward facing and backward facing at the same time.
Yeah, you're taking stuff that's clearly inspired from some past time, but like doing new things with it.
Yeah, like there is and so that reminded
or more to the point, not only doing new things but with it, but explicitly not doing what was done before, and only looking to new things.
Right, and I think that is something that is very special and very unique about this genre of music. There was something that the guys I think in Gunship said, something to the effect of like, it's a new music. It doesn't sound like the 80s. It's the sound of the feelings we have about the 80s projected onto music.
Exactly what this is.
Something like that. And he said, and he said something else. And he's like, you know, it was a time when films wore their heart on their sleeve. And before you got into like the meta and the self-awareness,
yes,
it was like a less cynical time.
Yes.
But this idea of like a movie wearing its heart on its sleeve, that really stuck in my head, and the idea of the art wearing its heart on its sleeve, and in a way, I think that in a sense, synthwave does really what all art does and all genres of music do, but synthwave is just very honest about what it's doing, because like they're like, yeah, we're taking things from this time period because this is what makes us feel good, and we're using this and we're using that and going forward with that.
Yeah.
I mean, because grunge fucking did that, like, but it was with punk rock, and but then taking like a metallic edge, whatever that means, but putting a punk ethos with it.
Yeah.
And like a pop sensibility, if you will, for lack of a better word. Because there were songs that were pop songs.
Yeah.
Pop in a very loose sense. Whatever.
Writing hooks.
Yes. Yeah. Stuff you could sing, stuff you could remember, stuff you could play on the radio. You know, but it's still a looking back to look forward. But it's being more cagey about it. You know?
Yeah. One of the things that I forget who brought it up in here was like, one of the aspects of this movement that they really identified with or really enjoyed was that a lot of people who are involved in it are very aware of where this all came from, as opposed to a lot of maybe some other genres who couldn't give a shit.
I see.
Or something like that.
Right.
And that kind of is basically that, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I think that well, and I mean, even in film, right? Like you look at, I mean, gosh, like Star Wars. This is just the example I can think of. You know, like he's referencing samurai films. He's referencing, you know, Buck Rogers. He's referencing all these things, and then he makes Indiana Jones. He's referencing Alan and Quartermain. He's referencing. He's George Lucas was just like making the shit, like remaking shit from his childhood.
Yeah,
like remaking the shit that had meant something to him, right?
Yeah.
And making the movie that he wanted to see. So like this is what all art is in so many ways. It's just that synthwave is just very like explicit and very like, yeah, this is like, I don't know. I don't know. Like hard on its sleeve feels that, I don't know, that really stuck with me when I heard him say it. I was like, yeah, because it's not. And I think that is what is another thing that's so special about this music that like makes it, because it goes down so easy. And it's not trying to be clever.
Right.
Like it's not even as hip as it is or has been or was at times the past 10 years. It doesn't feel like it was ever really trying to be.
Not really. And that's kind of something actually that's something that I wonder about with this genre, because they say a few times, like, they reference it in a different way. They kind of say, like, you know, when something starts to get popular, eventually it's going to be, you know, co-opted and bastardized into whatever else, or people are just going to get tired of it or whatever. And they're like, how many more years do we have?
We
like
got 5 or 10?
Yeah. And I come at that same question from a different perspective, though, which is like, in trying to put together a playlist for this, I could have put 4 or 5 hours of music on here for you or whatever. But the problem that I ran into very quickly was like, a lot of this, especially if you don't listen to it a lot of this might just sound the same.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, that's what I like about a lot of it.
Right.
Because I know what I'm getting.
Yep.
On the other hand, there's not a ton of nuance to it unless you kind of know exactly what you're looking for. Like with all these subgenres, like I said, there are differences, but to me, it's all just kind of in the same realm. Yeah. And so, will this reach a like creative point of a diminishing return point, right?
Sure.
Like sooner rather than later. I mean, it's been going for, 10, 15 years at this point.
Yeah, like how much more can you do with it?
Yeah, and how much differentiation really has there been? But seemingly enough.
But man, fucking...
But does there need to be a lot, actually? Also, is the other part of that.
Right. Well,
can you just keep kind of doing this for a while? And
I think that it'll... Because for one, and with any style of music, people are always saying that shit.
Yeah. Sure.
That like, oh, there's what else can you do with it? You know. I saw an interview recently with Carl Sanders of Nile, and he just, that motherfucker's like almost 60, okay, and he was like, yeah, man, the stuff that younger bands are doing in metal and extreme metal and death metal and the different influences they're pulling into it, I think it's amazing. I think the future of extreme metal is really, really bright, and I don't think it's anywhere close. Like the well is nowhere close to having run dry and stuff like that. And
sure,
it's just cool to hear
someone like that.
Yes,
say something like that. Yeah.
And so.
I mean, my only argument against that for this type of music is that it comes from such a hyper specific place.
Sure, of course,
and it is this very like purposefully, quote unquote, like simple thing.
Right, but death metal has been going on for 35 years, arguably, and this has been happening for 10-ish.
Right.
As a like, we're making this genre, or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to sort of like, I don't know, but this the thing is like, if it's based on this sort of like nostalgia, what people feel nostalgic for is going to change.
Right. So on the other hand, like, will this just run out naturally?
Are we going to get grunge wave? Are people going to get like, nostalgic about that?
I'm sure they will.
And
if they haven't already.
But yeah, but we're like, the thing I was saying about like clever, like, I hate shitting on artists, on other people, but like, okay, like you take like the White Stripes or something like that, like, or even like Modest Mouse. Mm-hmm. And I love Modest Mouse, But you like listen to that music, you're like, or Queens of the Stone Age. That's another good example. You're like, well, the guys think they're being clever. Like he thinks he's hip. You know? They're like, they think they're too cool for school. And yeah, their music's great, of course. Right?
Yeah.
But they're trying to be, you know, like they're trying to be clever. Or, you know, this is art. This is, you know, blah 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 blah. And like that's one of the things that's so cool about synthwave that it will, as far as I can tell, is there's not a lot. There didn't seem to be a lot. Doesn't seem to be a lot of like, no man, this is art. And
right.
Like there's not a big, you know, hipster element to it, if you will. Hipster's such a weird word. But yeah, anyway. That
like a purist element, you're saying.
Or just like from the creators, like it just feels like they're making stuff that they like. They're not really trying to like make stuff to impress or make something that's over anyone's head.
Right. Yeah.
That's maybe that's sort of what I fucking mean. I don't know.
I think that's just kind of what we were saying. Like that it's just they know what they're doing and they're gonna do that. And they're not trying to be much more than what they're trying to be.
Right. Like there was something that I said that I wrote down somewhere. Yeah, this music is never mind. Come back to that later. But yeah, it just goes down real easy.
But so it's interesting because, there was another part of when they were describing sort of the early years of this stuff, like the MySpace years.
Mm-hmm.
And there were some comments of like, sometimes I would, well, it wasn't quite the same. Or I think it was specifically like 80s Stallone, the super British like dude.
Yeah.
The older dude on here. Who
The guy was like born like 77.
Yeah.
You know?
He was like, I don't fucking know what Facebook is even.
Yeah.
I don't know how to use it. I don't know how to get a song on iTunes. I don't care. I was like,
right.
I like this dude. He was like, he was talking about how he would post some of his stuff to like a Facebook group or a MySpace group or whatever, and some fans of his other stuff would come in and say, this isn't even like one of your tracks. This doesn't sound like your stuff. And he was like, well, I fucking made it, so I think it is. And so that's coming at it from like the fans' perspective, where like they're expecting one thing and he's just doing what he wants.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I can't remember too many instances of if any of the creators themselves saying that they felt that way towards other creators. Right. Yeah. And or saying that they had run into that behavior in the community, I guess, more to the point.
Right. And this is an idea I feel like I need to spend some more time articulating. Like, what do I mean by like an art, you know, like artists trying to be clever, you know, or like stuff that, okay, maybe the intention doesn't matter. But stuff that attracts as being pretentious. And I didn't get a lot of that.
Yeah.
Or I haven't gotten a lot of this from this music that I've listened to, you know, either this playlist or other synthwave that I listen to. It doesn't feel pretentious.
Agreed.
And that's,
or it doesn't
for something so specific to not feel pretentious.
I think that's like a direct result of them going so directly along with their influence, though.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, because here's what it is, and like they keep coming back to, it's not so much like, there's not so much an art to what they're doing, because what they're doing is trying to recreate a feeling more often than not.
Yeah.
Instead of like sticking to a type of composition, or
right,
like instead of like trying to write jazz or trying to write a metal song or whatever, it's like we're just trying to recreate this really ethereal thing. But so much of it is so similar that it's like, it's clear that it's all coming from this one source. It's like, which is a very specific time period that lives in people's minds. But I think that doesn't allow for a lot of pretension.
Yeah, because you've kind of like let the cat out of the bag already.
Like, we all know what this is.
Yeah,
and we're just gonna do this.
Like, you're not gonna, You know, it's not like, well, I'm actually like quoting Mozart's, you know, blah blah da sonata,
Right.
which is some shit that like a death metal fucking guitarist might do. I mean, that's just still awesome, but it's like it could maybe be pretentious.
Oh, sure.
Um,
Yeah, pretension is such a weird thing for me because, like, I like a lot of shit that is very widely seen as pretentious. And some of it's like games, and it would be hard to explain here, but like going back to like Queens of the Stone Age, like they're an example of like they think they're very cool, and they put that forward and they write that into their music, but I like them a lot, and I don't necessarily think they're that cool in that way,
right.
But that is what they are trying to be, and I get that.
Yeah, I haven't tried to articulate it as an older person, you know, in a while, because as I age, I get more and more and more inclusive, I guess, and I try not to, you know, like whenever, because there's just been so many things that I've like shit on, and then later on I'm like, wow, I missed out on some really good stuff.
Yep.
Because I thought that they were stupid. I thought that those people were stupid because they cared about a thing I didn't understand.
Right.
How dare they?
Exactly.
And so I try to avoid that. But nonetheless, there is I don't know. I think there is I can't think of the great examples on like the scales of pretentious, right? But, you know, I know on one side of it, you have someone who is like, it came across like my feed today. It comes across like every few weeks, but like the Yoko Ono and on stage with John Lennon and Chuck Berry clip. Have you seen that clip?
Oh boy, I don't know. Maybe not.
But like Chuck Berry's eyebrows like almost like go down his back whenever like they go up and almost all the way back around whenever Yoko starts like doing her stuff.
Yeah.
And so there's something about like things that border on the avant-garde or whatever that like, yeah, that's pretentious.
Yeah.
But it also, I'm not saying it doesn't have value. I'm not saying it's worthless or whatever, but it's like, yeah, like because you're saying that like you the art of something like that is disrespecting the medium and making a mockery of the medium itself. And so you know you're doing that. Like, you know, you're going out there and pretending that there are no rules. And that is the statement in and of itself. Right? Like doing Andy Kaufman shit or whatever. Like, oh, this is some fucking blues rock. I'm going to go out here and just scream. You know that is not stylistically appropriate, and that is your statement.
Yeah,
you know,
like it couldn't be any more obvious there because that is the statement.
Yeah, like I guess like what I'm saying is like don't act like you don't fucking know. You know, like don't act like you don't know that people are gonna be like shocked. Oh, what the fuck are you doing? You know?
Yeah. It's a weird line to try to draw, I think, because I know that there are, I don't know, but I'm 99% sure that there are cases where something that somebody does is just the thing that they want to do, and to them it's just normal.
Sure.
But to most other people, to the masses or whatever, it's gonna go over their heads and it's gonna come across as pretentious. But maybe it's not the intention.
Exactly.
So I don't like drawing that line, I guess, a lot of the time.
Yeah, and you're probably right because, you know, there's no music that I really, really love that I think is pretentious.
Yeah, exactly. So, also that, yeah.
So there, I think that's the real test right there. Tell me an artist that's pretentious that you fucking love. You're like,
Yeah, it just gets weird.
Uh,
but so the other side of this is the quotes from John Carpenter throughout this thing, especially at the very end when he's just like, make what you fucking want to make, and it's gonna be something that someone's probably done before, but just put a little spin on it and all this stuff.
All
just like, boy,
God damn it,
the wisest words.
Yeah, like,
chisel this shit on my tombstone.
All meaningful art breaks the rules. Like, don't ask for permission and all that shit. And like,
yeah,
you know, like, don't don't knock on the door.
Break down the wall and hope somebody listens.
Yeah. No one can hear it if it's sitting on your hard drive. You know.
Yeah. Make stuff and put it out there.
Yeah, dude.
Totally.
Thank you, John Carpenter, for just existing.
Yes.
I did think it was funny, and I was like, oh, of fucking course your dad was a music professor and you played the violin when you were a kid. Of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Right.
You didn't just like, you didn't
materialize
this.
Yeah. You didn't just wake up one day with a synthesizer and a bass and then do all this.
Right, yeah.
Because the other thing about him is he plays, I think to this very day, he plays bass in his own rock band. And has forever.
What a goober. Wonderful, wonderful man.
What a guy.
Before we go on to talk more about that stuff, something else I thought was really interesting. I should have mentioned it earlier, but it was like, it's really, really weird to talk about, like, to hear like another community besides the metal community talk about how Nirvana and grunge fucks things up.
Yeah.
I was like, this is really wild.
Yeah. Yeah.
Should have said that.
True.
40 minutes ago. But yeah, and like that line, like John Carpenter's, I mean, fuck. I can't even, I don't even know where to begin. So I don't even know if I can. That's so fucking, it's so interesting that like he has a monolithic presence in this genre.
This genre, it basically would not exist without him.
And like the idea that he's Marty McFly, basically. like your kids are gonna love it. Like, that's basically what like, fucking happened.
Actually, yes.
Because, all right, so check this out, right?
God.
With my buddy Jacob, the music of Halloween, of the first Halloween film, that is the music that made him want to be a musician. Was the soundtrack for Halloween.
Awesome.
Like, can I have a keyboard? You know,
I see.
Can I play piano? You know, and it was like, all right, well, we'll get you this little one, and if you stick with it, you know, and like that was his thing. And eventually he got into guitar and metal and and then into like folk and singer-songwriter stuff, you know, and whatnot. He's an incredible musician, incredible guitarist, all these types of things. But that was his end.
Right.
You know, that was what like, I need to do this.
That was the spark for him.
And then similarly later in life, the soundtrack for It Follows reignited this desire to kind of get back into well, I don't know that necessarily reignited the desire, but whenever he decided to pick piano back up, one of the first things that he learned was pieces of the score from It Follows.
Right.
You know. So,
man, yes.
That stuff is huge impact on him.
Gotcha.
And so, and a lot of it has to do with like, again, like they're talking about like sort of how the atmosphere it creates, how it presents in the film, and how it guides you from that emotion to the next and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
And so,
yeah, I can empathize.
So before I have plenty of shit that I can like specifically say about that playlist. Oh yeah, this is another thing. Okay, so it's like because it's like okay, what makes the '80s unique, right? And I something I wonder um, is the '80s were the first decade that was really all about home media and like personal media and whatnot.
Yeah.
And so you like all of us kids in the 90s were able to experience all of this leftover pop culture of the 80s in a way that I don't think
hadn't really happened before.
Was possible for previous decades because the VCR wasn't a thing.
Right.
You know, and tapes and CDs weren't a thing in the same way. Like you had 8 tracks in the 70s and shit, but that's a lot different
yeah.
than
I mean, vinyl, but
yeah, that's true. But
movies definitely.
But like the thing is that,
and I think that's the real point there too.
But vinyl took a huge plummet, like in the, I guess the 90s, towards the end of the 80s, and throughout the 90s.
Well, yeah, I'm just talking about through the 70s and into the 80s, and then through the 80s. That was still kind of what you had primarily, and then cassettes came along.
Right.
I just feel like there was always some sort of avenue for a home-based musical collection.
Yeah.
Whereas there wasn't that before for movies.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess it did. There is a difference between like having your tapes and your but you didn't have a Walkman though.
Right.
That's the difference. That's the difference. It's like, so anyway, I thought that was there's some sort of interesting caveat there of like, well, we're able to wistfully, nostalgically remember this decade because we were able to only experience it through its pop culture, which we have access to.
Yeah, and then not only that, but if you found something that did resonate with you like that, like a Halloween or a Goonies or whatever the fuck else, you could watch that a million more times. You didn't have to go all the way to the theater to experience it. Like you could just live in that.
Right. You tape that shit off of.
Tape it off HBO is what
TNT,
happened. Yeah.
HBO. Tape it off of HBO, which stood for Hey, Beastmaster's on.
Yes. That's good. That was definitely how my family had most of our movies.
Oh fuck yeah!
It was like for a while, like my grandparents bought HBO and then they would just tape shit.
Yep.
And it was just a wall full of the white Polaroid VHSs.
Scotch, a lot of scotch.
A lot of scotch, yeah. A lot of Kodak as well. Yep.
Yeah, Kodak with the yellow and the gold stripes.
Exactly. There's a part in that documentary where the stuff that they're speaking over is just like the graphics that come up on the screen are just different like transitions, I guess, from different like Adobe Premiere scenes or some shit of just blank VHS style covers.
Nice.
And I'm like, yep, had that one. Had that one.
I got a kick out of seeing the gunship logo because it's very much, I don't know if it's Carl. I can't think of like
that logo you're talking about comes up in this documentary.
Well,
they put it on the screen at some point. The movie production logo.
Okay, yeah. I can't remember the name of it.
I can't either. But it's the C that goes like this. Right. Yeah. Yep.
I think it was like associated with like some of the Rambo movies and shit like that.
Right.
So. Okay. So I'm gonna throw some questions at you, just some kind of like speculative kind of things, and then we can talk a little more in depth about the playlist. Okay. So this is gonna be weird. So, in your opinion, what is the relative importance of the following musical elements in synthwave? Okay, I don't know what ranking I'm asking you to give these elements. I'm not asking you to put them in order or something like that. Like it's just like, is this important? Is it not important? What's its place? Right.
Out of 5 stars.
Okay, so rhythm.
Rhythm.
Yeah, like in the genre of synthwave, like how important is rhythm, and like how does it function?
I have no idea how to answer that question. Like the ability to maintain a rhythm or using a specific rhythm style, or
let me maybe think better of like how I'm like. Okay, so it seems to me that rhythm is very like all of the synthwave that I've ever heard is very rhythmic, right? Like you can't. I don't know if you can have like a synthwave ballad without like a percussive synth line. Like I don't know if you can have this music, right, without some like it's either. Hold on, that's not true because it can also just be purely atmospheric.
Yeah, you definitely can.
Right?
Yeah.
But it seems to operate between those two things, and different mixtures of those. You know, so.
Like specifically the It Follows track that I put on here is just like there's zero rhythmic element at all.
Sure.
Like it operates against a rhythm of some sort, but you don't hear it.
I understand what you're saying. Right. But on most of it, it's a very okay. Maybe it makes sense to like
on a lot of it, it's the most important part.
Right.
Like the Kavinsky track on here is just nothing but a driving rhythm.
Right. And even whenever it is, a lot of it feels so rhythmically inspiring too. Like it's just such a good percussive bed that it's like, okay, it's very easy to build other stuff on top of this.
Yeah, I guess that just depends on which one of these subgenres you're kind of going for.
Right.
Because stuff like Outrun, for example, is just heavily rhythmic.
Right.
And that's the primary focus of a lot of this stuff.
Okay.
Whereas stuff like one of the other subgenres,
right,
could be more like a dream wave or whatever the fuck, can be very atmospheric.
Maybe I got a better way to ask the question. So instead of like relative more like the role, right? What's the role of rhythm, right, in synthwave? That's probably that's what I'm asking. So all right, so going down the line, so like melody, like how does melody function in, you know, because to me it seems like it's not the most important part.
Yeah, I think a lot of times there is a melody, but maybe it's extremely simplistic. And there's just like, here is our 4-note progression, and we're just going to do that the whole time. And we're going to change other things.
Right.
We're going to change like aspects of the filters on the synths or on the beat, or we're going to add some more elements on top of it, or other sounds, maybe some sound effects, some quotes from movies or some shit.
Right. So it's not related. Yeah, it's like,
but it just depends again. Like there are some that it doesn't matter too much, but then there's some that it's just heavily melodically.
Well, like the
inspired.
Endless Summer record, the Midnight record that I'm familiar with, incredible melodies on that. You know, I guess it just depends, and I guess these are the little dials that determine the genres. You know, and
exactly.
in some way.
Exactly. Yeah.
And like harmony, so similar with the melody, because like what it doesn't feel like is you're going to get someone who is like, oh, I have a nice melody and I have a nice chord progression, and let me figure out some lyrics to it, and I'm gonna and then here's a synthwave song out of it. That doesn't seem to be how most of the people. Not that someone couldn't do that, but it doesn't seem that that's the process that most of these artists are using when they're writing. Like it's not about like a B flat diminished 9, you know, like that's not what's inspiring them.
Right. I mean, like we said, like a lot of times the inspiration comes from more of a feeling, sort of thing than a musical idea. But there are certain musical ideas that are more conducive to expressing that feeling. So like a lot of this is in minor key, for example. I think it's fucking because John Carpenter did a lot of shit in minor key. A big reason.
So Cool. Yeah, and then again, like, there's other things that are just super, like, things that seem really important is on, like, atmosphere, like that. I mean, to me, the genre is mostly just rhythm and atmosphere.
Yes. Correct, I think.
So, which again, like, kind of sets it apart from a lot of things, because it's not really about, because a lot of genres, a lot of music is like about, oh, my clever melody or my clever harmony or my clever lyric, you know, or even
very little in the way of lyrics in this genre.
Right, but it feels like when they are there, though, man,
they can be used interestingly. But then you've got stuff like the Dance with the Dead track I added on here.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of and you can tell from the documentary as well, like they are a live band.
Right, got a fucking guitar and everything.
Yeah, like they just have instruments and they play. There's a lot of guitar in all of their stuff, and so they do a lot of like guitar harmonies and shit.
Right,
it creeps in there sometimes.
Right.
And they make it work to their specific style of music.
Right, like they're, well, in their, something that happens on that I like a lot on that Midnight record is that there will be like a sax solo. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Or there will be a certain kind of tastefully done particular type of guitar solo. Things like that.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, like that is it the John Carpenter track from the Christine? Mm-hmm. Like the one that, like, when it comes in, it's just all fucking heavy and there's a crazy guitar solo on it and shit like that.
Yeah.
So,
oh man, so good.
It's canon. You can do guitar solos in synthwave.
Yep. The man himself showed you how to do
it. But there's also a lot of space in it too, which I think is something that adds to its ability to go down easy. Like it might be intense at times, but it doesn't ever feel overly dense.
I think that, I mean, again, it just kind of depends. It depends on which one of these subgenres. Because like if it's stuff that's sticking to that OG Carpenter feeling, if you want to say, like that was all movie music, right? And so the whole point of it was to be the whole point of it was to like leave space and just have something that can be in the background, but is still just so happens to be really interesting to listen to.
Right.
Or more to the point, I guess it can evoke the feeling of watching the movie, which is what this whole thing is about.
Right.
But then you've got stuff like the Kavinsky track on here, or like well, I didn't add the Laserhawk. The Laserhawk album Red Line is just, it feels like you're in a fucking car the whole time. And the Kavinsky track is just the whole damn time.
Yeah.
It's just nothing but in your face just rhythm. And it's awesome, but it is a different thing than some of this other stuff that can be more atmospheric. So, yeah.
Cool. Another thing is, more speculation here is, so why is it all, like the idea that it's related so much to film scores, like these sounds and these textures, and it's related to film scores. Like, part of my like speculation as to why is that you probably didn't have a lot of, synths are expensive now. I'm sure that they weren't less expensive in 1978. And so what?
Maybe, like, so when I found out about the synth that I ended up buying, which is a Donner is the model, and it was super cheap. It was $150 it was cheap for a synth.
Yeah.
What they based the architecture of that synth off of is the Roland, I think, 303. a synth from the early 80s that I think wasn't particularly inexpensive, but what happened was it was marketed as sort of like a replacement for a bass player, from what I understand. It was a bass synth, and they ended up not being all that popular at the time for what they were marketed for.
Yeah.
And so they ended up in pawn shops a lot. And it ended up to where people who ended up being more creative with them, people who came along and did like acid house and shit like that. Which is
that makes sense.
Like that is the synth that sort of defined the acid house sound.
Sure. That makes sense.
They made their way down.
Yeah.
And
That's awesome.
The people who were able to get them did interesting shit with them, and they became legendary for that reason.
Right. But like Tangerine Dream, like the stuff they were doing and the equipment they had, like, or like the guy who did the Blade Runner, Vangelis, or like you see like the pictures of him, and and the stuff's everywhere. And
He's just
like,
surrounded by synths.
It's like, dude, that's like tens and tens of thousands of dollars worth of stuff. And so part of me has to wonder that, like, I'm just gonna completely throw shit at the wall. It's like, I imagine like the reason John Carpenter was able to do this stuff. One, he was a musician, he could pull it off, right? But also he's like, look, you can pay a composer, like tells the film company, you can pay a composer, pay them their rate to write the music. Okay. And then you can pay the rate to have it recorded in studio, and then you can pay the rate to have it mixed, and you can do all that, or you can give me $5,000 to go play with this synthesizer for 2 days. And so yes, it was cheaper in the budget context, but you still needed money to get access to it, is sort of what I'm saying. Like, I don't, like, it wasn't like, oh, well, let me just spend $500, go down to the shop, get a guitar, and then I'll fucking record the soundtrack to my movie. It wasn't that. Like, there was a barrier, like a technological barrier to have, like, practical synth setups and whatnot. And so I don't know. I'm just like, I wonder if the idea that like, I wonder if the budgets of these movies is what allowed access to these sounds and these palettes.
I mean, on some level,
something I'm speculating.
On some level, well, yeah, I mean, to the point of what you just said, like, it was cheaper for them to have John Carpenter do it, and he says as much in the documentary.
Right.
He was like, I'm faster, I'm cheaper. That's why I did it.
Right.
On my movies. But also, like, in the 70s, like when these synths were first kind of coming around, it was new technology. So
yes, and the other thing,
it also kind of like had to be expensive because it was like being developed.
Right. Well, another thing too is that, like, when they were coming out, you had people doing different things with them.
Yeah.
You had people pushing like the technical boundaries of them, and like Emerson, Lake and Palmer and all that sort of shit, or whatever. Like, it was like, what's the craziest shit you could play on this? So it wasn't until you're trying to score films with it that space and atmosphere becomes paramount, because before that, when synths were being used, it was more for like shredding, or there was some aspect of that. I don't know enough.
Yeah, I don't know enough about that either, but it does seem pretty clear, like, the shit that Tangerine Dream, for example, was doing with it, because they did movie scores, but they have like 60 some odd albums.
Right.
They've been going for like 50 years straight.
Right.
They have like rotating members over time, but the stuff that they were doing on their albums back then wasn't what everybody else was doing.
Right.
It was and that's why it became influential, because it was very similar to the stuff that like John Carpenter was doing. Or
Right.
It was this atmospheric stuff. It was this stuff that allowed for a lot of space.
Right. Right.
And so I guess they were using synths in different ways in that way.
It's just so fascinating to like try to speculate and consider, like, why do these sounds mean the nostalgic feeling of the 80s?
Mm-hmm.
Why is it the synth sounds that mean that, and not some other set of sounds? Like if John Carpenter had scored it with an electric guitar, had scored like Halloween with a rock band, would that movie just suck and we just don't care? No one,
like, would it have had the same effect?
Yeah, and then and is it just the happenstance that it was something that seemed to be so novel and new that sound was associated so much with the 80s, and then you just so happen to have the grunge thing that is so associated with the guitar that you have that cut off, right? So people stopped doing it, and so they stopped doing it. Now you can go back and it means something,
Because so one of the points that someone, I think, in the documentary brings up is like, all of this inspiration is very movie focused, for one thing. Like that's a constant throughout all of this. But somebody brings up the fact that movie soundtracks specifically, up until like 95, kind of kept sounding pretty similar.
Right. And then a lot of like low budget movies kept the same,
Yeah. Presumably, if that's the case, because that was just a cheaper way to do things. You didn't have the money to have an orchestra there or something like that. But a synth is, you can do a lot with a synth.
You can still have a lot of variety of timbre.
Yeah.
Without having to have pay a lot of different musicians day rate.
Yeah, and maybe you don't even necessarily need everything that like they used on the Blade Runner soundtrack, because maybe, I think, 10 years later things had progressed in such a way that you can just have, you probably don't need all that.
And if you're just doing like the soundtrack to like some full moon horror movie, like Subspecies or some shit, you just got to get it done.
Yeah.
And nonetheless, but that's what we were watching.
Yes, exactly.
Like those are the things that we were getting exposed to when we were 10 years old, staying up later than we should have, watching USA Network or TNT or whatever, or TBS. And that's what anchors it to this nostalgic feeling.
Right.
Yeah. What a fucking mess. It's so interesting.
Yeah, it really is. It's just so weirdly specific.
Yeah.
That's the part about it that keeps getting me. It's like, I can't think of another. I mean, I'm sure there are. I just don't have the context for it, but I can't think of another artistic movement like that is just like, here's this one little thing in these few years, and here we're gonna do it again.
Yeah,
and that's it.
And it almost makes me wonder if it's like, is it maybe just that there's just other things that just aren't just directly marketed towards people your age, because that was something that was kind of interesting to see. It was like, oh, all the people making this are about our age or a little younger.
Right.
Right. And
obviously the people getting into it, well, presumably the people getting into it it varies, because you keep seeing that multiple people mention the fact that, like, we have fans who say they weren't even born in the 80s and they didn't experience this, but they still have this nostalgia for it somehow.
Right.
Which is like also an interesting question. Like, that is what you're pulling from to make this music. The music you're designing is meant to evoke that emotion. So why does that work? Yeah. What about that?
It's almost as if it's a perfection or an articulation of nostalgia as an abstract feeling, as like a musical motif. Like, oh, that's because it's like, oh, major's happy and minor's sad. You you can hear that without someone needing to explain to you what you should be happy about or what you should be sad about. You're like, oh no, that sounds sad. That sounds dark. That sounds this. And we have, and it's almost like this, like synthwave is nostalgia in the same way. It's like somehow, somehow that combination of melody and rhythm and timbre is nostalgia, is the nostalgia chord. And it doesn't need a reference, right? Oh, I'm nostalgic for X, right? Like, it doesn't,
it doesn't need any outside context. It's like self-contained nostalgia somehow.
Right. It doesn't need to be like, it doesn't need to reference, something. It doesn't need to, there's like a mathematical way to say this. I can't think of how to do it.
Sure.
But it doesn't need, because like, okay, so if you're gonna be nostalgic about it, because see, that's it. You say nostalgic about.
Mm-hmm. Nostalgic for something.
Yeah. And this is nostalgia without a preposition. It is
raw nostalgia.
Yeah, like it is directionless nostalgia. Is so yeah, like people, it's like someone born in the fucking 90s who didn't experience the 80s at all, feels nostalgia for it.
I guess the thing that I jump to immediately to refute that is, well, movies. Like,
because they experience those movies.
People still watch movies into the 2000s or whatever, from the 80s into today.
Because those are amazing movies.
Yep.
And when again, I think it goes back to like,
is that enough?
You know what it is?
I guess it has to be.
I think another aspect of it is that something that was sort of, no, this is what people say, but I actually don't believe it. Sort of talking about like the confidence and like the, the neoliberal dream of the 80s or whatever.
Yeah.
And whatnot, but I don't think that that's true. Like, I know a lot of people talk about Rambo and all that sort of shit, but it's like, if you watch those fucking movies, there's a lot more, to me, there's a lot more like thematic meat on the bone in the Rambo movies than people give them credit for. The first three, especially.
I mean, he's not confident. He's fucking crazy. Like, he has shit that he's having to work through.
In the first one, he's a fucking vet, and he's just like, I want to go talk to my dead friend's family, and a cop fucking harasses the shit out of him, arrests him for no reason.
Yeah.
Fucks with him to the point that like, anyway, that all hell breaks loose. Then he's put in fucking prison. and then in the second one, they like, hey, you do this special op. And then the and then he ends up getting whatever. But like the enemy is like the bureaucrats and like it's not like this. It's not a John Wayne movie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not a,
right.
It's not a like, all of the armies are good guy, like the army is a good guy, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's about this individual Rambo getting fucked by everyone, basically. So anyway, but nonetheless, there is some, but the thing is that Rambo does like get the shit done in the end, right? There is like a sort of
his ability to do it is very high.
Right. And I think that maybe that the neoliberal dream of American competence is as epitomized in the films of the 1980s. Yeah. And maybe that's something that we're nostalgic for, because there's a big difference between that and something like a Seven, or The Crow, or all these things that I think of when I think of like 90s movies, where shit gets real like, I guess you're fucked.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, Yeah, I see that in 80s movies. It seems to me the difference is comparing it to like a John Wayne movie or something is probably a good way to go, because that feels like a movie that is like confidence incarnate, because if John Wayne had issues that he was working through, he's not showing them. He is, stoic cowboy man.
Right, yeah.
And he does his thing and he does it well and whatever. But like you say, like Rambo, like shit's fucked up there. Like Terminator, like she gets away from him, but she's like traumatized forever.
Right.
Ghostbusters, like they're complete fuck ups. They make it work against all odds,
Sure.
They stumble to the finish line. Like none of those are like good situations. And I think a lot of these other movies, if you look at them a little closer, like they're all kind of bad situations, but things happen to get done.
Right. Yeah. And it's, I don't know.
Maybe like
just need someone smarter than us.
Yeah.
To unpack this. But yeah. Like I guess like I don't imagine like a generation of kids like in the 2000s. Not that it would be this way, because you start to have like media presented and referenced in different ways, and they have, because that's the thing, VHS is invented in the fucking, or like home video becomes a thing in the 80s.
Yeah.
So we as kids, like we had like fucking 1 decade worth of you know what I mean? So the movies that we were going to watch were going to be, it was going to disproportionately be represented by 80s movies. That's going to become less and less as you move forward, right? But I don't imagine, people being like, "Oh yeah, dude, I remember watching Seven when I was a kid." And
I mean, I do.
I mean, I do too. Well, like no,
but again,
but like people like 10 years younger than us,
yes,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
And they're like, "Yeah, man, I just get all nostalgic for that feeling that I had when I watched Seven."
I saw that dude slumped over his table in the bowl of SpaghettiOs and just gave me the warm fuzzies. Yeah.
I don't know. It's like when I think about like the 80s movies versus the 90s movies. But I don't know. Maybe someone would be like nostalgic for like American Pie or some shit. I don't know. Ugh.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something there. I just don't quite know how to.
I don't know how to
draw those lines.
Yeah. Jet, why are you not here?
This was the time. Fuck.
Okay, I have a few like random specific things about like some of the tracks.
So real quick, did you happen to watch the YouTube video I posted for the Jean Michael Jarre
performance? That was wild.
Wasn't that fucking crazy?
That's so weird.
The craziest part about that is that I have never heard that event referenced.
Me neither.
Having lived in Houston and around Houston all my life, I don't know how I've never heard of that happening.
I don't either. That blew my mind.
So,
then it was like
so yeah, it's from 1986, and this is a dude who's been like doing many millions of albums sold, like hugely popular dude. At the time, this was like the biggest gathering for a concert ever.
What?
And he like held the record for this for a little while.
Wow.
Apparently. But so what happened is I was able to figure out that this happened in I think it's Governor's Park in downtown.
Okay.
It's like the northwest part of downtown near City Hall. Because if you look at like Google Maps, you can see the same angles from the video. That's how I figured it out.
Okay.
And so this is a dude putting these giant keyboards up in downtown Houston and shining lights on the buildings in downtown and like putting video and shit up there and just fireworks constantly.
Yeah.
And he's just playing synthwave basically to the city of Houston, and people are like stopping on I-10 and listening and watching it. It's like, what the fuck is this?
We know someone who stopped to watch that. Like, we have met them.
Almost assuredly.
And they never thought to fucking tell us.
And I've never heard that this happened. I've never heard that for one night, Houston shut the fuck down and people watched synthwave happen at downtown.
So
it blows me away.
It's so wild. And like Home Dude on the electronic drums. Like,
yeah.
doing his best to keep up.
Yeah.
What it looked like.
Yeah. Just a wild. It was like 2 hours long or something, or was it only maybe an hour? I don't know. But anyway, did you watch the end of this by chance?
No.
So at the very, very end, there's like a reporter there, and she's talking to people who just came out of it, and it's just fucking Houstonians, like you'd expect them to be. They're like, that was fucking wild, man. Like, yeah, like I don't know, man. I don't know what that was, but it was pretty awesome. It is. Yeah, exactly what you'd expect someone from Houston to say about some crazy shit like that. But they went and they watched it and they liked it. And that's even crazier to me. Is like
that's a different time.
1986 is when this happened.
Right.
And you could just have people go watch stuff like this happen and be into it.
Well, that's almost
feels so foreign to me now.
That's almost similar to the way that I've heard people talk about like the Day on the Green shows in San Francisco, like those early Metallica shows of like, well, there's this thing happening.
Yeah.
Or like the way that when we were in high school, the way people would go to BuzzFest.
Yeah.
And like not give a shit about any of the bands there, but then they would leave there being like, there was this band called Linkin Park, and holy shit, you know. But like just to go see the thing's happening. It's happening here. Let's go see what it's about, and approach it with like an open mind and to be open to the experience, whatever it was, because it was fucking happening. And well, we're all here and we're experiencing together, so that's something. Even if it sucks, we'll all. We'll see it suck together.
Yeah, I guess. But like stuff like that happens, or at least in my memory, it always happens at a musical venue. Whereas this just happened in downtown.
Right. Yeah,
which
like
is so wild.
Well, the way that they shot it too, like the way that it's like, because it is something like over the top. And it is pure spectacle.
It's completely over the top.
But they're also like showing the guy with like the headset and like the smoke machine.
Yes.
You know, like things like that. And it's like,
I forgot about that. Yeah.
But that's consistent in the way that the intro and everything is shot. Like they're like, this is a real thing. It's really like you feel like not only do I know someone who saw this, I know someone I know knows someone who worked on this.
Right.
Like
it probably felt like you were in the production at some level.
Well, and it was like you really had that feeling of like, oh, people had to. Normally, when you watch a concert video, it just seems like it
feels like it just happens.
Yes.
Right. Whereas this, it felt like they had to put a lot into making this thing happen.
Yeah, it's like, oh man, dude, I wonder how many fucking bolts that guy had to tighten.
Right.
You know.
Right.
And you don't feel that even when you watch like a Rammstein fucking concert, you don't have that feeling of construction, right? Because of how they present it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you did.
Yeah.
With this,
or like a Super Bowl halftime show or something like that.
Yeah.
Or any arena pop concert these days.
Right. You're not seeing a dude run around fucking, denim, looking like a fucking, like, just normal fucking dude that's like, well, this is my fucking day job. I just got to make sure this is done. This is safe, you know?
Yeah. Like, just imagine seeing a dude, like you said, like, with the headset, with, like, the smoke machine, like, holding it like a fucking proton pack. Like, you know? Just, like, a weed, or, like, a leaf blower or something.
So much smoke.
Going to town, man.
Yeah, man.
Amazing.
That shit is fucking wild.
Just what a picture into a time and place that we lived through somehow, but is completely foreign.
We were like 3.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like
I bet if I went and asked my parents about it, they'd be like, oh yeah, I remember when that happened.
Yeah, like it's like,
why did you ever tell me about this?
Dude, we were goddamn fucking stuck trying to get across town to your aunt's birthday party.
Yeah.
Had to listen to that fucking foo-foo shit.
Man.
I get all mad at like they can't like I can't well, because of that fucking traffic jam I could never stay in Beverly Hills Cop ever again. Turn it off.
Too many bad memories. Yeah, I think that was sort of all the other like sort of ancillary stuff that I had. Yeah, so if you want to go through the playlist.
I'm not gonna do too much because I just don't want to. It might be a little redundant.
Yeah, I don't honestly have a lot to say about the playlist itself.
I mean, it's amazing, and I loved it, and I really, really enjoyed listening to it. But I think we covered most of it. Okay. So...
Yeah, just to reiterate sort of what it is, like the first 7 or so tracks are origins, basically. Like here's some John Carpenter that really reflects what this music became.
Right.
Here's a Tangerine Dream track from Risky Business. Here's one of the tracks from Blade Runner, and that's pretty much it. And then the rest of it is stuff that I picked that I got really into once I sort of found this genre and said, here's what I like.
Right.
And here's like a small selection of some of my favorite stuff.
Right. I'm not going to get too not going to go too in depth, but something that I noticed, like in the Tangerine Dream song, is like there's a lot of really rich rhythmic stuff going on. So like there's an opening rhythm in that Tangerine Dream song on here, which is very similar to a rhythm you would hear played in a samba music, but the way it's played on the synth, and it's just kind of sped up. And so if you just slow that rhythm down, it's very similar to what you would hear played on the snare drum when someone adapts samba to the drum set.
Oh, okay.
So interesting things like that. I'm not going to demonstrate yet or anything because
Gotcha.
it would just take too much time. And then that's the thing that sort of carries on with some of the other the later stuff, is that like from a percussion perspective, it's really interesting how much the roles of the music kind of parallel the different roles on the drum set when you're adapting Latin music, or even jazz, to where there's a consistent pulse, but then and that's usually done with like the feet. But then the hands are doing some sort of like syncopated rhythm or some texture, some syncopated whatever. Mm-hmm. But the difference is that in synthwave, you get like the drum set void, like the bass and the snare and maybe the hi-hat, but the bass and the snare are giving you that pulse.
Yeah.
And then it's some type of like synth pattern on top of that is where all your syncopation is coming from, as opposed to it being sort of broken up on the different parts of a drum kit. It's broken up on different instruments, but it feels like it's getting a similar thing.
It's like serving the same function.
Yeah. And that was something I thought was really interesting. I had in my mind of like, I can just like fucking pop over there and demonstrate it, but it's too late, and I'm making an ass of myself.
That's fair.
Something else that was interesting about the Kavinsky track.
Yeah.
So the kick and the snare sounds on this are so short but huge. It's not like 80s huge snares. There were like lots of reverb and whatnot, like goo. Right, like this sounded like it was in a hall or whatever, like, but the snare sound on that Kavinsky track, like it is taking up so much real estate, but its duration it's very tight, you know what I mean? It's like it feels like you're being punched in the gut and in the mouth, like goom, goom, you know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely it does.
And so yeah,
and I think something that helps that happen is, I think it's the only track on this playlist where this effect occurs, and it's something that I wasn't sure if I liked for a long time, but I think I actually love when it's done well, which is that all throughout that track, there's the percussive element tapping, and then there's a sort of higher synth melodic line, and that line dips whenever the drums hit.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's an effect that you hear in songs sometimes when it's like like that, and it does that very specifically on purpose.
Yeah.
And I think that is adding to that effect of having it be so much more punchy.
Right.
Because it feels like it's punching the rest of the song out for a second, and it just does it the whole time.
Yeah. Like there's a lot I only have the vaguest understanding of how that kind of automation works when you're mixing and whatnot. But it's a thing that's done in a lot of mixing, just in more subtle ways.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. I think it's just basically when this thing happens, just dip the volume.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And I think you can even set it. You can even sort of tailor it to automate to like certain EQ things and stuff like that, to where like, so that you get this
just dip these frequencies or whatever.
Right. So you get a lot of clarity from like the bass drum, because it's, you know, in a pop record, because it's pulling those frequencies out of like guitar and bass guitar whenever the bass drum hits.
Right.
And shit like that, you know. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and not all of this stuff on here is exactly even. Some of this, maybe it could be argued, isn't exactly synthwave.
Oh, really? Like what?
Maybe like the Moon track Paris on here.
Okay.
Maybe the Danger track.
So about the moon track, I was like, is there a name for this kind of bass line, like house or acid or something?
I don't know.
Because it kind of reminds me of like Lords of Acid. Maybe.
Yeah. Okay. But I think it probably could be argued that's closer to some offshoot of like EDM or something like that. But it's just slower. But it has elements that could associate it with synthwave. And this is one of the tracks that was off the Hotline Miami soundtrack.
I got it. And the other one you said was the Danger track, or
the Danger track. You maybe could argue that this is just EDM on some level.
So much more syncopation in the actual drum track.
Yes.
On that one, it really stood out for that reason.
Yeah.
Because there's like, it's not just you know.
Right. There's way more going on there. The Dance with the Dead track, you could just argue that this is some form of metal, I guess.
That's just Dance with the Dead.
Man, they're one of my favorite fucking bands. They're so good.
They're like the only band that new band that I've seen you wear their T-shirt of.
Yeah. They're probably a few different bands in this genre, actually, I could say this about, but they're one of those bands that I can just put on anything that they've done and love it. And maybe the Home track, Resonance, the last track on here, you could say that that's like vaporwave, which I think there's some delineation there, but again, to me, it just sort of all rolls into the same basic thing.
I don't. So at some point I'll ask you what the difference, like, where's the lines?
At some point, maybe I'll go find out.
Between EDM and synthwave, or synthwave and vaporwave. What is the vapor referring to in vaporwave? Okay.
It's probably some aspect of the atmosphere that it creates.
Okay.
That I haven't dug into, but if you tell me that something's vaporwave, I know vaguely how it sounds or how it feels.
Okay.
So, but yeah, Home, another one of those artists where like immaculate.
Got you.
It's catalog as far as I'm concerned. Oh God, all this music is so. That Carpenter Brute track on here, fucking so good. Like that track, the Kavinsky track on here, the Dance with the Dead track, like that is what I like about some of the best metal that I like.
Sure.
Just intense and driving.
Yeah.
It just feels. It makes you feel so cool.
There's an interesting thing in the Laserhawk song where it's like a 5/4 over 4/4 motif.
Yeah.
Kind of thing happening, which I was like, and you don't really, it's like, oh, you don't get the superposition of it until like the stuff comes in. But first I'm like, oh shit, this is a 5. That's neat.
Right.
And then they just play like 4 or 2 over it or whatever. I'm like, all right, well, that works. How about that? And I was like, wait a minute, is it really in 5? And I'm like, holy yep, yeah. But it creates this like interesting, like kind of loping effect.
Yeah.
You know. So something interesting too about like this music. So the washed out song.
That's another one that could probably not be considered synthwave on some level.
What would it be considered?
Something like vaporwave or something also.
Okay.
But not explicitly synthwave.
So,
and this is maybe the only track with vocals on here. I think so.
Yeah, maybe.
I think it is.
So, sorry for yawning. Kid woke me up way early this morning.
Yeah.
So I was listening to this and I happened to come across a post about Jeff Stockstill. You know, and so I like start tearing up and all this sort of stuff, and it was just like it was an interesting sort of just acknowledgement and sort of a proof of principle about how this music does perfectly hold space for a certain kind of, you know, nostalgia or yearning.
Yeah.
And like this kind of like sense of loss.
Mm-hmm.
That is kind of unique because there is an intensity to it. There's a sincerity to it, but it also just it goes down real easy, you know. It doesn't ask a lot of you.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it.
Yeah, and that was just like a good, like, it felt like a good like example of that, because I don't know that it would have brought that if another song or another thing that I would have listened to would have brought that emotion out of me in the same way.
Right.
But this did.
Right.
So
yeah, that's a really weird aspect of this music. Like, I think we kind of touched on it earlier, but it somehow does convey like a longing.
Yeah.
Or like a wistfulness.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really know why that is. But something about just the music itself. I mean, maybe subconsciously it is tied to all the other shit we've talked about.
Right.
The origins and all that, but also just that's why I can just put on a lot of this music and just go, because it puts me at ease in a way.
Right. Yeah, like, because there's so many things like you can you know, like, oh, I need to reflect on something, or I need to work out, or I just need to think, or I need to do the dishes.
Yeah.
Or
there's some of this for all of that.
Or I need to get some work done.
Yep.
Or you need to drive. Of course, it's definitely made for that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So maybe the lyrics of Nightcall are just actually about synthwave itself. There's something about you that I can't explain.
I think we cracked it. There you go.
It's done. What a prophet. So okay, I think that's all I got.
Cool. Yeah, we did just. I just meant this to be one episode. I could probably do another one, but I don't know what about. But if we want to get back into this, I'd be totally down.
Cool.
Or anything tangentially related.
Yeah. Well, because your depth of knowledge on this is, and what you like, maybe that's what it should do. That's what we should do, is because this was just more about, like you said, the genre itself. And so now we could actually explore the aspects of it that you personally like, and it can be more about that.
Sure, maybe.
You know. At the worst case that happens is I get a cool playlist to listen to, and then we hang out and talk about bullshit.
True. Bye.
God damn it, we're weird.
How long was that?
It's like 3.5 hours.